The cold was not the worst of it. The cold was honest. It slid under wool and leather, crept along the seams of boots, found the gaps in gauntlets. It made men hunch and women draw their furs tight, made horses snort steam and stamp their hooves into frozen mud. The cold did what it had always done in the north. It reminded everyone that Winterfell was built to endure, not to comfort. It was the quiet that threatened to swallow Jon Snow whole. On the battlements, where the wind had a knife edge and the sky was a sheet of bruised pewter, Jon Snow stared out over the fields beyond Winterfell. The snow had fallen in the night, a thin, clean layer that hid old scars, wool ruts, churned earth, footprints from yesterday's patrol, like the world had decided to pretend it had not been broken. Beyond the outer wall, the land rolled away in soft white curves and dark lines of leafless trees. Farther still, the horizon disappeared into a low curtain of snow clouds. Could have been peace. Could have been the start of any winter morning Jon Snow remembered from boyhood. And yet Jon Snow felt as if he were watching it through someone else's eyes. Ghost moved beside Jon Snow without sound, a pale shape against the stone. The direwolf's fur was the color of fresh fallen snow. His eyes the red of embers banked under ash. Ghost's ears flicked, catching noises Jon Snow could not hear. The distant clatter of a wagon wheel, the muffled shouts of men in the yard, the thin cry of a raven. Ghost leaned in, his shoulder brushing Jon Snow's leg in a steadying pressure that was half affection and half warning. "You should be inside," Sansa Stark said, her voice carried away at once by the wind and yet somehow still finding Jon Snow's ear. Jon Snow did not turn immediately. He watched the snow in the air, the way it tumbled like sifted flour. He watched it swirl around the crenellations and settle on the iron spikes that crowned the parapet. "There's too much to do inside." Sansa Stark came to stand at his side, careful not to crowd him. The fur around her shoulders was thick, the brown and gray of wolf pelts sewn together. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her hair braided and pinned up like a lady of Winterfell, though the rest of her looked like she belonged in a battlefield camp. Practical boots, a knife at her belt, gloves that had seen hard use. Sansa Stark's eyes, once soft and frightened, were sharp now. Winter had honed her. Below them, the yard was already awake. Men hauled timber. Boys carried bundles of kindling. A line of soldiers practiced with spears, their movements stiff in the cold. At one corner, blacksmiths hammered iron while their breath rose like smoke. Jon Snow's gaze drifted toward the gatehouse. A pair of guards tramped by, stamping their feet, their faces hidden behind scarves. The iron portcullis loomed above them like the jaw of some great beast. "Lord Glover's men arrived before dawn," Sansa Stark said. "They want an audience." Audie Mormont sent another raven. "She wants more grain sent to Bear Island before the sea freezes." Sansa Stark's mouth tightened. "And there are still the houses that haven't answered at all." Jon Snow rubbed at his jaw, the stubble there rough under his glove. "They will. When they see the dead with their own eyes, they will." Sansa Stark's breath puffed in a small bitter cloud. "If they live long enough to see anything." Jon Snow did turn then, meeting Sansa Stark's gaze. The wind tugged at his cloak, rattled the leather straps of his sword belt. "We need them ready before the dead come, not after." "I know," Sansa Stark said. There was a pause, a slight shift of weight as if she were choosing her words the way one chose a step across ice. "But you can't keep doing this alone, Jon Snow." Jon Snow's name in Sansa Stark's mouth sounded like a plea and an accusation at once. Jon Snow looked away. It was easier to look at the snow than at his sister's face when she worried over him like he was still the boy who had been sent to the wall. Ghost's head lifted, muzzle pointed into the wind. The direwolf's hackles rose a fraction, then smoothed. "What is it?" Jon Snow asked, though Ghost did not answer. Sansa Stark followed Jon Snow's gaze. "Do you think it's them?" Jon Snow listened. The wind, the distant clank of iron, a raven's croak. No horns, no screams. No snapping of bones beneath dead feet. Not yet. Sansa Stark's eyes lingered on Jon Snow's throat, where the skin was pale and ridged. The scars were never truly hidden. The collar of his tunic could cover them, but the memory of a blade's bite sat behind Jon Snow's eyes every time he swallowed. "You didn't sleep," Sansa Stark said. Jon Snow knew he had not slept, and still the words struck like a thrown stone. "I slept." Sansa Stark gave him a look that said she had learned when men lied. "How long?" Jon Snow wanted to say it was none of Sansa Stark's business. Jon Snow wanted to say the truth, that sleep had become a thing with teeth, that it came in fits and never without a price. Instead he said, "Long enough." Ghost pressed closer, as if to remind Jon Snow that even if the living did not understand him, the dire wolf did. Sansa Stark's voice softened. "When you came back, you didn't come back the same." Jon Snow's hands tightened on the stone. The battlement was cold enough to burn. "I don't know what I came back as." The words tasted wrong. Jon Snow was a man, wasn't he? Flesh, blood, bone. Yet when Jon Snow closed his eyes, he could still feel the moment his heart had stopped. There had been a vast, empty quiet. Not darkness, not peace, just a space without sound, without warmth, without even fear. And then the sudden crash back into breath and pain, like being dragged out from under ice. Sansa Stark watched him, and for a heartbeat Jon Snow saw the girl she had been, looking at him as if he might vanish if she blinked. But Sansa Stark's chin lifted. "You came back because... we need you." Jon Snow almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. "Need," as if the world had pulled him back like a rope, as if duty could haul a dead man upright. Need was a chain, and Jon Snow had worn chains before. In the yard below, a hammer struck iron. Once, twice, 3 times, each blow sharp and clean. The sound reminded Jon Snow of the wall, of the way picks rang when men cut ice. Jon Snow's mind slipped, unbidden, into the edges of a dream he had tried to forget. Fire. Not the friendly crackle of hearth flames, but a roar like the world itself burning. Stone beneath his feet that was black and glassy, warm as living skin. A sky the color of bruised wine. And above, a shadow huge, sweeping, with the slow certainty of wings. Jon Snow had woken with his heart hammering and the taste of smoke in his mouth. Ghost nudged Jon Snow's hand, then looked out over the fields again. The direwolf's eyes narrowed. "What is he looking at?" Sansa Stark asked. "I don't know," Jon Snow admitted. For a moment they stood together in the cold, 2 Starks on a wall, watching a world that wanted to end them. The snow fell softly, as if unaware of any war. Then the sound came, not from outside Winterfell, but from within it. A horn, low and urgent, blew from the gatehouse. Sansa Stark's head snapped around. Jon Snow's body moved before thought, instinct carving a path. Jon Snow's hand went to the pommel of his sword. Men in the yard stopped, heads turning. A second horn blast sounded. "Rider!" someone shouted below. "A rider from the south." Sansa Stark's eyes met Jon Snow's. A rider could mean news. News could mean allies, or enemies, or worse, news that the dead were closer than anyone believed. Jon Snow's throat tightened around scars that remembered steel. Ghost growled once, deep and low, and began to move toward the stair down from the wall. Jon Snow followed, the cold forgotten, his heart thudding like a distant drum. And somewhere under that steady beat, faint as a thought and yet impossible to ignore, Jon Snow felt something else. An answering pulse, hot as coals buried under snow. The rider had been nothing more than a messenger with frozen eyelashes and a voice cracked by cold. Grain tallies, troop counts, the usual scrape of survival. Jon Snow had hated himself for the relief that had washed through him. When the messenger had been dismissed and the yard returned to its work, Jon Snow had found himself angry for being glad the news was mundane. He carried that anger into the training yard. Longclaw was heavy and familiar in Jon Snow's hands, the Valyrian steel blade dark as smoke and yet catching what little light the winter offered. Jon Snow faced a man-at-arms with a blunted sword. They circled. The man's breath puffed white from behind his scarf. His grip was tight with the nervousness of sparring the king in the north, even if the title sat wrong on Jon Snow's shoulders. "Again," Jon Snow said. The man attacked. Jon Snow parried, stepped inside, and with a twist of his wrists sent the other blade skittering across churned snow. The man-at-arms stumbled, caught himself, and bowed his head. Jon Snow lowered Longclaw. "You're thinking too much," the man-at-arms swallowed. "I don't want to die," Jon Snow finished, and his voice was flatter than he intended. "You will if you keep worrying about what you're supposed to do." The man-at-arms flushed beneath his scarf. He retrieved his sword, embarrassment and determination warring in his eyes. Again. They went again. Jon Snow's body moved as it always had, faster than thought, trained by the wall, by wildlings, by battles he could not forget even if he wanted to. Steel met steel with a dull ring. Boots slid in the snow. Around them, men trained in clusters. Spear drills, shield walls, archers loosing arrows into straw targets that had been painted with crude faces. The sound of the yard was a rough music. Metal shouted commands, laughter, curses. Tormund Giantsbane's laughter rose above the rest like a war horn. The wildling stood near a rack of practiced spears, his massive arms bare despite the cold, his red beard speckled with ice. He watched Jon Snow fight with open approval, as if the whole thing were a tavern brawl he had paid to see. "Jon Snow," Tormund Giantsbane bellowed. "You hit him like you're still angry with the world." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "Maybe I am." Tormund Giantsbane grinned wider. "Good. Anger keeps you warm. Anger keeps you alive." Davos Seaworth stood a few paces away, hands tucked into his sleeves, the fingers of his gloves worn thin. Davos Seaworth's face was weathered like old rope, his eyes always searching. He looked at Jon Snow not like a soldier watching a commander, but like a man watching a storm forming over the sea. "You shouldn't push them too hard," Davos Seaworth said when Jon Snow stepped back to let another man take the practice sword. "They need to learn," Jon Snow said. "They do," Davos Seaworth agreed. "But you're not just teaching them to fight. You're teaching them to think they can win." Jon Snow wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his glove. Sweat cooled fast in winter. "They can win." Davos Seaworth gave a small, careful shrug. "They can survive if they listen. Winning, that's another matter." Jon Snow's eyes drifted toward the edge of the yard where Bran Stark sat, quiet as a statue. Bran Stark's wheelchair was carved from dark wood, the arms shaped like wolves. His blanket was pulled up to his waist. His face was calm, almost blank, as if he were watching a play he had already seen. Arya Stark stood behind Bran Stark, half in shadow, her posture loose in the way of a cat that could spring without warning. Arya Stark's hair was shorter now, her expression sharper. Arya Stark watched the yard with a faint, amused disdain, as if most of these men would not last long in a real fight. Jon Snow found it difficult to look at Bran Stark for long. Bran Stark's eyes had changed. They were still Bran Stark's eyes, gray, stark gray, but something sat behind them, something vast and distant. When Bran Stark looked at Jon Snow felt as if he were being measured by something that did not care if he passed. Jon Snow walked toward Bran Stark, Longclaw at his side. Snow crunched under Jon Snow's boots. Ghost paced behind him, silent, his nose twitching at the smells of sweat and leather and blood. Arya Stark's eyes flicked to Jon Snow's sword, then to Jon Snow's face. "You're going to wear the ground down with that pacing," Arya Stark said. Jon Snow huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. "I wasn't pacing." Arya Stark arched one eyebrow, unconvinced.
Bran Stark's gaze lifted.
He looked at Jon Snow for a long moment, as if he were watching something happening far away. Then Bran Stark said, "You don't sleep." Jon Snow's shoulders stiffened. "Sansa Stark told you." Bran Stark blinked once. "I saw you." Jon Snow felt a flash of irritation. "You see too much." Bran Stark did not react. "You're always here," Bran Stark said. "Even when you're not." The words made the hair at the back of Jon Snow's neck rise. "What does that mean?" Bran Stark's fingers rested lightly on the carved wolf arm of the chair. His hand looked thin, pale. It means you're afraid of what you'll see if you close your eyes. Jon Snow wanted to deny it. Jon Snow wanted to say Bran Stark did not understand, that Bran Stark was not the one who had felt a knife open his throat, who had drowned in his own blood on snow. But Jon Snow swallowed those words. Bran Stark had fallen from a tower and lost the use of his legs. Bran Stark had traveled beyond the wall and come back with something no one could name. Pain wore different faces. "I dream," Jon Snow said instead, because that was true. "That's all." Arya Stark leaned forward a fraction. "Nightmares?" Jon Snow hesitated. The dreams were not always terror. Sometimes they were strange. Sometimes they left Jon Snow waking with his skin hot, as if he had slept too close to a fire. Sometimes he woke with a taste of salt on his lips and the smell of ash in his nose, though Winterfell's air was clean and sharp. Sometimes there was a sound, a deep rumbling that Jon Snow felt in his ribs more than heard in his ears. Jon Snow looked down at Ghost. The direwolf watched Bran Stark with a wary stillness, his tail low. Ghost did not like the way Bran Stark smelled now. Not fear, something else, like old wood and cold earth and lightning. "I've had worse," Jon Snow said finally.
Arya Stark snorted.
"That doesn't answer the question." Bran Stark's gaze drifted past Jon Snow's shoulder, toward the gray sky. "You've been afraid of the dark since you came back," Bran Stark said softly. "But not because of ghosts." Jon Snow's hand tightened on the hilt of Longclaw.
Bran Stark.
"You're not who you think you are," Bran Stark said. The words hit like a punch to the chest. Jon Snow felt the yard around him fade a fraction, as if the sound of training had been muffled. "What are you talking about?" Bran Stark looked back at him. "You're Jon Snow," Bran Stark said, and Jon Snow's heart lurched at the familiar name. Then Bran Stark added, "But Jon Snow is not the name your mother gave you." Arya Stark's eyes widened a fraction, then narrowed again.
Bran Stark.
Bran Stark did not look at Arya Stark. "You have to know," Bran Stark said to Jon Snow, "before you go south." Jon Snow's blood ran cold. "Go south?" Bran Stark's expression did not change. "You will, because you think it's the only way to save everyone." Jon Snow stared at Bran Stark. "I haven't decided." "You already have," Bran Stark said. "It's in the way you stand when you look at the maps with Sansa Stark. It's in the way you listen when the men talk about dragonglass and dragons. It's in your dreams." Jon Snow's mouth went dry. "What do you know about my dreams?" Bran Stark's gaze sharpened, and for a heartbeat Jon Snow felt as if the cold sky itself were looking through Bran Stark's eyes. "I know you hear something calling," Bran Stark said. "Something that doesn't belong in the north." Davos Seaworth stepped closer, careful. "Bran Stark," Davos Seaworth said gently, "maybe this isn't the place." Bran Stark's eyes flicked to Davos Seaworth, then away. "The place doesn't matter," Bran Stark said. "It's already happening." Jon Snow's chest felt tight, as if the scars on his throat had reached down into his ribs and pulled. "Tell me what you mean." Bran Stark's lips parted, and for the first time since returning to Winterfell, Bran Stark looked almost like the boy Jon Snow remembered, hesitant, as if what he was about to say was too large to fit inside a normal conversation. Then Bran Stark said, "You were never a bastard." The yard's noise flooded back in like a wave. Steel clanged. Men shouted. Tormund Giantsbane laughed again, somewhere far to the left. Snow fell, indifferent. Jon Snow could not move. "That's not possible." "It is," Bran Stark said, "and Samwell Tarly will tell you soon." Jon Snow's head snapped up. "Samwell Tarly is coming here?" Bran Stark nodded once. "Samwell Tarly is already on the road. Samwell Tarly has read what no one else could. Samwell Tarly knows the name you should have had." Jon Snow's heart hammered. The heat he had felt beneath his skin in those strange mornings flared, sudden and unwelcome, like a coal breathed into life. Arya Stark took a step toward Jon Snow, her face hard. "Bran Stark, you're frightening him." Bran Stark's gaze returned to Jon Snow. "I'm telling him the truth," Bran Stark said. "The truth isn't kind." Jon Snow's fingers flexed around Longclaw's hilt. The wolf's head pommel was cold under his palm. "If you're lying," Bran Stark did not blink. "I don't lie." Ghost's growl deepened, just a low vibration in his chest. Jon Snow swallowed. The scars on his throat pulled. "Then who am I?" For a heartbeat, Bran Stark's eyes seemed to go far away. When Bran Stark spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost reverent. "You are the son of ice and fire." The phrase was a riddle, the kind old men used to mutter by the hearth, a thing to frighten children into staying close to the flames. But Bran Stark said it like a fact. Jon Snow's mouth tasted of iron. Davos Seaworth cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the cold. "Perhaps we should go inside," Davos Seaworth suggested, "before someone hears something they're not meant to." Arya Stark's gaze swept the yard. Men trained. Men laughed. No one watched them. Yet Jon Snow felt suddenly exposed, as if the snow itself could carry Bran Stark's words to every ear. Jon Snow nodded stiffly. Inside, Bran Stark's wheelchair creaked as Arya Stark pushed it toward the keep. Davos Seaworth fell into step with Jon Snow. Ghost paced close, his shoulder brushing Jon Snow's thigh. The direwolf's warmth was real and grounding. As they left the yard, Tormund Giantsbane's voice boomed behind them. "Jon Snow, don't leave without me." Jon Snow did not answer. Jon Snow's mind was too full of a single, impossible sentence. "You were never a bastard." And under it, like a second heartbeat, that strange heat pulsed again. Stronger now, as if something far away had turned its head. By the time Samwell Tarly arrived, the snow had thickened and the light had begun to fade into the dull blue of late afternoon. Winterfell's gatehouse was a throat of stone and iron. The portcullis was raised, teeth dripping meltwater. Guards stood with spears planted, their eyes wary. A small line of onlookers had formed, stable boys, cooks, men off duty, drawn by the sound of hooves and the promise of news. Jon Snow stood at the front of them, his cloak pulled tight, Ghost at his side. Davos Seaworth hovered half a step behind, his expression carefully blank. Arya Stark leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her eyes sharp. Sansa Stark stood a few paces back, her face composed in the way she wore like armor. Bran Stark was there too, his wheelchair positioned where he could see through the gate, his gaze fixed on the road beyond. The riders appeared as smudges at first, dark against the white. Then shapes resolved. Two horses, one with a bundled figure clinging awkwardly to the saddle, the other carrying a woman and a child wrapped in furs. Jon Snow's chest tightened as recognition sparked. Samwell Tarly had always been broad, but now Samwell Tarly looked softer still under layers of winter clothing, his cheeks round and red from cold and exertion. Samwell Tarly's hair was longer than Jon Snow remembered, curling out from under his hood. His eyes were bright and anxious. When Samwell Tarly saw Jon Snow, Samwell Tarly's mouth fell open. For a heartbeat, Samwell Tarly looked as if he might fall off the horse simply from relief. "Jon Snow!" Samwell Tarly shouted, voice cracking. Jon Snow's feet moved before his mind caught up. He strode forward, boots crunching snow, and when Samwell Tarly slid down from the saddle with all the grace of a sack of grain, Jon Snow caught him around the shoulders. Samwell Tarly's arms wrapped around Jon Snow like a drowning man grabbing a rope. Samwell Tarly's body shook. "You're alive!" Samwell Tarly gasped into Jon Snow's shoulder. "You're alive! I heard you were..." Samwell Tarly pulled back, eyes shining with tears that froze at the corners. "I thought..." Jon Snow swallowed hard. The simple force of Samwell Tarly's embrace, the warmth of it, hit Jon Snow like an old memory. "I'm here," Jon Snow said, and his voice went rough. "You made it." Samwell Tarly laughed and cried at once. I did. Gilly approached more cautiously, her cheeks wind-burned. Little Sam bundled against her chest. Gilly's eyes darted from Jon Snow to the direwolf and back again. "Jon Snow," Gilly said, a shy smile tugging at her mouth. "It's good." Jon Snow nodded to Gilly, his gaze lingering on the child. Little Sam blinked up at him, curious, his tiny face peeking from a hood lined with rabbit fur. Jon Snow's chest ached at the sight. A child meant hope, and hope was a dangerous thing. Ghost stepped forward, sniffed Gilly's boots, then turned his nose toward Little Sam. The direwolf's ears flicked. Little Sam made a small sound and reached out one mittened hand. Ghost did not bare his teeth. Ghost simply sat, great head tilted, watching. "Don't," Gilly murmured, though there was no fear in her voice, only habit. Jon Snow's eyes flicked to Bran Stark. Bran Stark watched the scene with the same calm stillness as always. Yet Jon Snow could feel Bran Stark's attention like a weight. Sansa Stark stepped forward, her posture formal. "Samwell Tarly," Sansa Stark said. "Welcome to Winterfell." Samwell Tarly blinked, wiping at his eyes with the back of his glove. "Lady Sansa Stark," Samwell Tarly said, bowing awkwardly. Thank you for." "There will be food and a fire," Sansa Stark said briskly, already shifting into command. "You look half frozen." Samwell Tarly gave a weak laugh. "I am. We are. The roads." "Inside," Sansa Stark interrupted. "Before you turn into a statue." The group moved through the gatehouse into the inner yard. The noise of Winterfell wrapped around them. The smell of smoke, the clang of tools, the shout of men. Samwell Tarly looked around as if seeing it all through water, overwhelmed. Jon Snow walked beside Samwell Tarly, his mind buzzing. Bran Stark's words had become a tight knot in Jon Snow's chest. "Samwell Tarly knows the name you should have had." In the great hall, a fire roared in the hearth, throwing heat and light onto stone. The long tables had been pushed back, making space. Servants hurried with bowls of stew and mugs of ale. Gilly sat near the fire, Little Sam on her lap. Davos Seaworth claimed a seat close enough to listen but far enough to give space. Sansa Stark stood with hands clasped, watching everyone like a hawk. Jon Snow sat across from Samwell Tarly. Ghost lay at Jon Snow's feet, eyes half closed but ears alert. Samwell Tarly wrapped both hands around his mug as if it were the only thing keeping him from shattering. Steam rose from the stew in front of him, fragrant with onions and salted meat. Samwell Tarly did not eat. Samwell Tarly's gaze kept darting to Jon Snow's throat.
"I'm sorry," Samwell Tarly blurted suddenly.
Jon Snow frowned. "For what?" "For not being there," Samwell Tarly said, words tumbling out like stones. "For leaving. For..." Samwell Tarly swallowed hard. "For not stopping it." Jon Snow's scars itched. "You couldn't have." Samwell Tarly shook his head violently. I should have done something." Jon Snow leaned forward. "Samwell Tarly, you're here now." That seemed to steady Samwell Tarly a fraction. Samwell Tarly took a breath, then another, as if gathering courage. "I came because I found something," Samwell Tarly said. Jon Snow's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "About Dragonglass?" Samwell Tarly nodded quickly. Yes, about Dragonglass. There's a mountain of it under Dragonstone. Records in the Citadel, old accounts. Dragonstone was built on it." Samwell Tarly's eyes lit with the familiar spark of a man who had found knowledge like treasure. "Enough to arm everyone. Enough to kill White Walkers," Jon Snow finished. Samwell Tarly's face sobered. "Yes." Samwell Tarly hesitated, then glanced at Bran Stark, who sat near the fire, silent. Bran Stark's eyes met Samwell Tarly's. Samwell Tarly's breath caught. "There's more," Samwell Tarly whispered. Jon Snow felt the air in the hall shift, as if everyone sensed a storm gathering even if they could not see the clouds.
Sansa Stark's posture tightened.
Davos Seaworth leaned in a fraction. Even Ghost lifted his head. "What is it?" Jon Snow asked, though he already knew. Samwell Tarly's hands shook around the mug. "I found a record," Samwell Tarly said slowly, choosing each word with care. "A High Septon's diary, hidden in the Citadel's vaults. Samwell Tarly swallowed. It said Prince Rhaegar Targaryen didn't kidnap Lyanna Stark. The name Lyanna Stark hit Jon Snow like a blade. Jon Snow's mouth went dry. Samwell Tarly hurried on, voice rising with urgency. It said Prince Rhaegar Targaryen had his marriage annulled. He married Lyanna Stark. In secret, but it was legal. It was recorded. Samwell Tarly's eyes were wide, desperate. That means... Jon Snow's head spun. That means nothing, Jon Snow said sharply, because the alternative was too large to hold. It means everything, Samwell Tarly insisted, because if Prince Rhaegar Targaryen married Lyanna Stark, then their child. Jon Snow slammed his hand down on the table, hard enough to make Muggs jump. The sound cracked through the hall like a whip. Servants froze. Gilly clutched little Sam closer. Ghost's head snapped up, lips pulling back from teeth. "Don't," Jon Snow said, voice low. The scars on Jon Snow's throat burned. "Don't say it." Samwell Tarly flinched, but did not back down. Samwell Tarly's eyes filled again. "Jon Snow," Samwell Tarly said, softer now. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know. Because your whole life, my whole life was a lie," Jon Snow snapped, and immediately regretted the harshness when Samwell Tarly's face crumpled. Sansa Stark stepped forward. "Jon Snow," Sansa Stark said warningly. Jon Snow dragged in a breath. The fire's heat felt too hot, like it wanted to crawl under Jon Snow's skin. "Samwell Tarly," Jon Snow said, forcing his voice steady. "Why are you telling me this now?" Samwell Tarly's hands tightened. "Because Daenerys Targaryen is in Dragonstone," Samwell Tarly said. "Because everyone is talking about her dragons and her army and the way she means to take the Iron Throne." Samwell Tarly leaned forward, eyes locked on Jon Snow's. "And because you're not just Jon Snow. You're..." Bran Stark spoke, his voice calm and distant. "Aegon Targaryen." The hall seemed to tilt. Jon Snow stared at Bran Stark. "No," Jon Snow said, but the word was weak, a child's denial. Bran Stark's eyes did not waver. "Your mother was Lyanna Stark," Bran Stark said. "Your father was Rhaegar Targaryen. Lyanna Stark named you Aegon." Jon Snow's chest felt T, as if the name itself had closed a fist around his heart. Aegon. The name belonged to conquerors, to dragonlords, to men who burned the world into submission. It did not belong to a boy raised in Winterfell's shadow. Samwell Tarly's voice broke. "I didn't want to bring you pain," Samwell Tarly whispered, "but it matters. It matters because Daenerys Targaryen thinks she's the last Targaryen. It matters because you have a claim." "I don't want a claim," Jon Snow said, and his voice came out raw. Sansa Stark's face was pale. Arya Stark's eyes were sharp as knives. Davos Seaworth looked as if someone had struck him across the mouth with a fish. Gilly watched, confused, her brow furrowed. Little Sam gurgled softly, unaware of the earthquake shaking the room. Jon Snow pushed back from the table so abruptly the bench scraped stone. Jon Snow stood, the movement stiff, controlled only by force of will. "I need air." Jon Snow walked out of the hall before anyone could stop him. Ghost rose at once, padding after him like a pale shadow. The corridors of Winterfell were dim, lit by torches that smoked and spat. Jon Snow's boots echoed on stone. The air smelled of old cold and soot. Jon Snow's breath came too fast. In the yard, the snow had thickened. It fell in steady sheets, muffling sound. The world was quieter out here, but Jon Snow's mind was louder than any hall. Aegon Targaryen. Jon Snow laughed once, harsh, and the sound vanished into the snow. The name felt like a mask someone had tried to force onto his face. Jon Snow thought of Eddard Stark, the man who had raised him, who had looked at him with stern disappointment and quiet affection, who had never spoken Jon Snow's mother's name. Jon Snow thought of the way Eddard Stark's eyes had gone distant whenever someone spoke of Robert Baratheon and the war. Was this why? Jon Snow walked without knowing where he was going until the ground sloped and the trees of the gods would rose up, dark and bare. Ghost trotted ahead, then stopped, looking back at Jon Snow. The direwolf's red eyes glowed faintly in the torchlight. Jon Snow's hands shook. Jon Snow looked down at them, disgusted. He had faced death. He had faced armies. He had faced monsters in the snow. And yet a name threatened to break him. Because it wasn't just a name. It was the weight of blood. It was the question of who he belonged to. Jon Snow stepped beneath the Godswood's branches. Snow dusted the dark trunks. The air here was different, older. The heart tree's red leaves were gone for winter, but its face remained, carved into pale bark, eyes and mouth twisted in eternal watchfulness. Jon Snow stood before it, the snow falling around him like ash. "I'm Jon Snow," Jon Snow whispered, as if the tree needed convincing. The wind sighed through branches. Somewhere in the castle, a door banged. Far away, a raven croaked. And beneath those sounds, deep and faint, Jon Snow thought he heard something else. A low rumble like thunder. Under the earth, Jon Snow froze. It wasn't in the air. It was in him, a vibration in bone, a pulse of heat in the blood. Ghost's ears flattened. The direwolf let out a low whine. Jon Snow's breath caught. For a heartbeat, Jon Snow saw, not with his eyes, but with something behind them. A flash of black stone warmed by sun, waves crashing against jagged cliffs, and above that, a shadow that swept across sky like a sail made of night. Jon Snow blinked hard. The vision vanished, leaving only snow and trees. Jon Snow pressed a hand to his chest. His heart hammered as if it wanted out. "Aegon Targaryen," Jon Snow whispered again, and the name felt like fire. Bran Stark found Jon Snow in the Godswood, as if Bran Stark had known Jon Snow would come there the moment he left the hall. Bran Stark's wheelchair appeared between the trees, pushed by Arya Stark, the wheels leaving faint tracks in fresh snow. Samwell Tarly trudged behind, boots slipping, his breath coming in visible bursts. Samwell Tarly's face was pale with worry. Davos Seaworth followed too, slower, his gaze wary. Sansa Stark was not there. Perhaps Sansa Stark had stayed behind to keep the hall from falling apart. Jon Snow stood before the heart tree, his breath steady now only because he had forced it to be. Ghost sat at Jon Snow's side, alert and tense, watching Bran Stark with the uneasy focus of an animal sensing something it could not fight. Arya Stark stopped the wheelchair a few paces away. Arya Stark's eyes flicked to Jon Snow's face. "You ran," Arya Stark said, not accusing, just stating. Jon Snow did not answer. Bran Stark's gaze settled on Jon Snow. The snowflakes landing on Bran Stark's blanket looked like bits of salt. "This is where you belong," Bran Stark said. Jon Snow's jaw clenched. "I belong in Winterfell," Jon Snow said. "I belong in the north." Bran Stark's eyes did not change. "You do," Bran Stark said. "And you don't." Samwell Tarly stepped forward, hands out as if trying to approach a wild animal without spooking it. "Jon Snow," Samwell Tarly said softly. "I'm sorry, truly. I didn't." Jon Snow's voice snapped like a whip. "You didn't think. You read something in a book and now you think you know me." Samwell Tarly flinched as if struck. "I know what the record says." "A record?" Jon Snow spat. "Words on a page. What does that change?" Samwell Tarly's eyes shone, but Samwell Tarly held Samwell Tarly's ground. "It changes that you were never meant to be hidden away," Samwell Tarly said. "It changes why Eddard Stark never told you who your mother was. It changes." "It changes nothing," Jon Snow said, but the words did not convince him. They did not even convince the snow. Davos Seaworth cleared his throat, that familiar nervous habit. "If I may," Davos Seaworth said, "names and claims aside, there's a war coming. And Samwell Tarly says there's Dragonglass where this Daenerys Targaryen is sitting. That seems to be the part of this story that might keep us all alive." Bran Stark's gaze flicked toward Davos Seaworth, then back. "Daenerys Targaryen is not the only reason Jon Snow must go," Bran Stark said. Jon Snow's eyes narrowed. "Why are you so certain I must?" Bran Stark's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made the air feel thick. "Because you're already connected to what waits," Bran Stark said. Not just to the dead. Jon Snow's skin prickled. What does that mean? Bran Stark looked past Jon Snow, toward the heart tree's carved face. When I was beyond the wall, Bran Stark said, I saw the Night King. I saw what he wants. Bran Stark's fingers rested on the wolf carving. And I saw fire, not just in the south, not just in dragons, in you. Jon Snow felt a flare of anger, sharp and hot. I'm not fire, Jon Snow said. I'm not a dragon. Arya Stark's eyes flicked, wary. Samwell Tarly swallowed. You might be, Samwell Tarly whispered. Jon Snow snapped his gaze to Samwell Tarly. Don't. Samwell Tarly's voice trembled but did not stop. Targaryens, your father, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Samwell Tarly's breath hitched. The blood matters. That's what everyone says. The dragon blood. The thing that let them ride dragons. Jon Snow's laugh was bitter. And you think that's in me? Samwell Tarly's eyes searched Jon Snow's face as if Samwell Tarly could see the answer there. I don't know, Samwell Tarly admitted. But Bran Stark's voice cut through. I can show you, Bran Stark said. Jon Snow's mouth tightened. I'm not interested in. You are, Bran Stark said simply. Jon Snow stared. The snow fell. Ghost's breath steamed. Finally Jon Snow said, Show me. Bran Stark's eyes went distant. The air in the gods would seem to shift, as if the trees leaned in. Jon Snow felt a pressure behind his eyes, a pull like being dragged toward the edge of a cliff. The world blurred. For a heartbeat Jon Snow saw the Tower of Joy, sun-baked stone against a blue sky. Eddard Stark stood there younger, sword in hand, his face grim. Men lay dead in the sand, cloaks white with blood. Lyanna Stark lay in a bed, sweat slicked, face pale, eyes fever bright. Lyanna Stark's hands clutched at a bundle, an infant. Lyanna Stark's lips moved, whispering words Jon Snow could not hear. And then Eddard Stark bent close, grief carving him hollow. Jon Snow's breath caught. The vision shifted like a raven turning its head. Now Jon Snow saw black stone cliffs rising from a dark sea. Waves slammed against them, white foam exploding. A castle clung to the rock, its towers jagged and old. Dragonstone. The name was not spoken, but Jon Snow knew it. Above the castle, the sky churned with clouds lit from beneath by a red glow. And then shadows moved, 3 of them, immense, sweeping. Wings beat once, twice, the sound like thunder rolling across the water. Jon Snow's heart slammed against his ribs. Heat surged through Jon Snow's veins like someone had poured molten metal into him. A roar tore through the vision, so deep it seemed to shake the world. Jon Snow jerked back into the Godswood with a gasp, knees almost buckling. Ghost surged to Jon Snow's side, pressing hard against Jon Snow's leg. Jon Snow's hand clamped onto Ghost's fur, fingers digging in. Ghost's warmth was real. The snow was real. The heart tree's carved face was real, watching. But the roar still echoed in Jon Snow's bones. Samwell Tarly stared at Jon Snow, eyes wide. You saw it, Samwell Tarly whispered. Jon Snow swallowed, throat scars pulling tight. Yes, Jon Snow said hoarsely. I saw it. Bran Stark's voice was soft. It sees you, Bran Stark said. Jon Snow's head snapped. Up. What? Bran Stark's gaze held steady. There are dragons on Dragonstone, Bran Stark said. Daenerys Targaryen's dragons. They are not like horses. They don't belong to anyone the way men think they do. Bran Stark's eyes flickered, as if seeing something far away. But blood calls to blood. Fire calls to fire. Jon Snow's hands shook again, not from cold. I don't want this, Jon Snow said. I don't want. Want has nothing to do with it, Bran Stark said. Davos Seaworth muttered under his breath. 7 save us. Arya Stark's voice was sharp. If this is true, if Jon Snow is who you say, then telling anyone could tear the North apart. Sansa Stark's absence suddenly felt heavy. Jon Snow imagined Sansa Stark in the Great Hall, trying to keep the lords calm while this truth sat like a bomb in Jon Snow's chest. Samwell Tarly stepped forward again, braver now. Jon Snow, listen. Daenerys Targaryen has to know about the dead. She has dragons. She has an army. If we can convince Daenerys Targaryen, if we can get Dragonglass. Jon Snow's mind latched onto the practical like a drowning man to driftwood. If I go to Dragonstone, Jon Snow said slowly, I can get what we need. Davos Seaworth nodded at once. Davos Seaworth said, and maybe make friends with a queen who could help us, if she's as good as her reputation. Arya Stark's eyes narrowed. Or get yourself killed. Jon Snow looked down at Ghost, then at the heart tree. I've been killed, Jon Snow said quietly. It didn't stop anything. Bran Stark's gaze did not flinch. You will go, Bran Stark said, not command, just certainty. You will stand in a place made of black stone and dragon glass. You will hear the roar with your waking ears. Jon Snow felt that heat again, deep and steady, like a coal that refused to die. Samwell Tarly's voice trembled with urgency. There's something else, Samwell Tarly said. The annulment, it means you're legitimate. It means Daenerys Targaryen is not the rightful heir. It means... Jon Snow's eyes snapped up. Stop, Jon Snow said sharply. I don't want to talk about thrones. Samwell Tarly's mouth closed, but the truth remained between them like a drawn blade. Davos Seaworth shifted, uneasy. Whether you want to or not, others will, Davos Seaworth said. If this gets out. It won't, Arya Stark cut in. Jon Snow looked at Arya Stark. Arya Stark's expression was fierce, protective. Jon Snow felt a surge of gratitude so sharp it hurt. Jon Snow turned back to Bran Stark. If I go, Jon Snow said, I go as Jon Snow, king in the north. Not. Jon Snow could not bring himself to say the name again. Not as a claim. Bran Stark's eyes were calm. You can call yourself what you like, Bran Stark said. The truth will still be true. Jon Snow's jaw clenched. Then we keep it quiet, Jon Snow said. Until the dead are gone. Until it doesn't matter. Samwell Tarly's eyes filled again, but Samwell Tarly nodded. All right, Davos Seaworth. Exhaled slowly. We'll need a ship, Davos Seaworth said. And an invitation. Daenerys Targaryen isn't likely to welcome strangers. Jon Snow looked toward the castle, toward Sansa Stark's burdens. I'll tell Sansa Stark, Jon Snow said. Arya Stark's voice was low. She won't like it. Jon Snow's mouth tightened. She doesn't have to like it. She has to understand. Bran Stark's gaze drifted to the heart tree. Sansa Stark will try to protect you, Bran Stark said. From the south. From Daenerys Targaryen. From yourself. Jon Snow felt suddenly tired. Bone deep. I don't need protection, Jon Snow said. Bran Stark looked at Jon Snow, and there was something almost like pity in Bran Stark's distant eyes. Everyone does, Bran Stark said. The snow fell steadily, soft as silence. Jon Snow stood under the bare branches, the heart tree watching, Ghost's warmth pressed against his leg. The world was cold and heavy and full of things Jon Snow did not want to carry. But the dead were coming, and somewhere far to the south, on a black stone island, something with wings had turned its head. The great hall of Winterfell could hold 1,000 men, and on that night it seemed determined to try. They came in with snow in their beards and on their shoulders, stamping their boots, shaking off cloaks, the smell of cold and horses and wet wool filling the air. Lords and ladies sat at the high tables or stood in clusters near the hearth. Soldiers lined the walls, spears in hand. Ravens croaked from the rookery above as if arguing among themselves. Jon Snow stood at the front, near the dais with Sansa Stark at his right. Arya Stark lingered in the shadows near a pillar. Davos Seaworth stood close enough to whisper if needed. Tormund Giantsbane was there too, looming at the back like a mountain, arms crossed, watching with the amused suspicion of a man who expected betrayal from anyone with a title. Bran Stark sat near the fire, silent, his gaze fixed on nothing anyone else could see. The hall quieted as Jon Snow stepped forward. Lord Glover's face was ruddy with drink and cold, his jaw set, Lady Mormont sat on a raised bench with her small back straight, her eyes bright. Other northern banners hung heavy from the rafters, wolves and bears and mermen. Jon Snow felt their eyes on him, some wary, some loyal, some openly resentful. The North had followed Jon Snow because Jon Snow had been a symbol, the bastard who had become their king, the man who had bled with them and for them. Jon Snow could feel the fragile threads of that loyalty stretching. Sansa Stark's hand rested lightly on the table beside Jon Snow, fingers still. Jon Snow could sense the tension in Sansa Stark's posture. Sansa Stark had argued with Jon Snow in private, voice low and fierce, insisting that leaving was dangerous, not only because of the dead, but because of the living. "You can't trust a Southern queen," Sansa Stark had said. "You can't trust anyone who has dragons." Jon Snow had not told Sansa Stark everything. Jon Snow had not said the name Aegon Targaryen aloud. Jon Snow had watched Sansa Stark's face as Jon Snow spoke of Dragonglass and Daenerys Targaryen and necessity. Jon Snow had seen fear there and something else. Anger at the way the world kept pulling Jon Snow away from the North, away from the family Sansa Stark had fought to get back. Now, in front of the hall, Jon Snow lifted his chin. "We need Dragonglass," Jon Snow said, voice carrying. "We need it to fight the White Walkers." A murmur went through the crowd. Some nodded, some frowned. A few looked uncertain, as if still clinging to the hope that the dead were a story used to frighten children. Jon Snow continued, "There's a deposit on Dragonstone, a mountain of it. Samwell Tarly found records in the Citadel." Samwell Tarly stood awkwardly near the side, cheeks red, eyes wide with the pressure of being looked at by so many. Gilly sat near the hearth with little Sam, trying to be invisible. Lord Glover snorted. "A mountain of it?" Lord Glover said loudly. "And we're to believe some bookish Ites watchman who ran from his post." The words hit Samwell Tarly like a slap. Samwell Tarly's shoulders curled inward. Jon Snow's voice sharpened. "Samwell Tarly did more for the Watch than most men who stayed," Jon Snow said. "Samwell Tarly killed a White Walker. Samwell Tarly saw the dead with his own eyes. Samwell Tarly's word is good." Lady Mormont's voice cut through the murmurs, clear and fierce. "I believe Samwell Tarly," Lyanna Mormont said, "because I believe Jon Snow." A few voices of agreement rose. The hall steadied a fraction. Lord Glover's eyes narrowed. "Even if there is dragonglass on Dragonstone," Lord Glover said, "it belongs to the Dragon Queen now, Daenerys Targaryen. You think she'll just give it to us?" Jon Snow felt that tight knot in his chest tighten. This was the moment. Jon Snow glanced at Sansa Stark. Sansa Stark's face was calm, but her eyes were sharp with warning. "We need to ask," Jon Snow said. The hall erupted in murmurs. Someone laughed, bitter. Someone cursed. "You mean kneel," a voice called. "You mean bend the knee to a foreign queen." The phrase spread like wildfire. Bend the knee. Bend the knee. Jon Snow felt the words crawling over him, 1,000 tongues tasting them.
Sansa Stark's jaw tightened.
Jon Snow raised a hand. "Listen," Jon Snow said, voice louder. The hall quieted slowly, like a beast reluctantly stilling. "Daenerys Targaryen has dragons. Daenerys Targaryen has an army. The White Walkers don't care who sits on the Iron Throne. The dead won't stop at Moat Cailin. They won't stop at White Harbor. They won't stop until everyone is dead." The cold stone of the hall seemed to press in. Men shifted, uncomfortable. "We have two choices," Jon Snow said. "We either fight alone and die, or we join with anyone willing to fight." Lord Glover's face reddened. "And you'll do whatever it takes, eh? Even if it means selling the North to a Southern queen?" Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "No," Jon Snow said. "It means getting what we need to survive." Another voice rose. "The North chose you because you were different, because you weren't like the Southern lords and their games." Jon Snow's eyes swept the hall. "This isn't a game," Jon Snow said. "This is life and death." Lady Mormont stood then, small but commanding. "The North remembers," Lyanna Mormont said. We remember the Boltons. We remember the Lannisters. We remember what happens when we stand alone and proud. Lyanna Mormont's eyes flashed. I don't want to bend the knee to anyone, but I would rather bend than break. A stunned silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fire. Jon Snow looked at Lyanna Mormont with a surge of gratitude. Sansa Stark stepped forward, voice cool and controlled. Jon Snow will not bend the knee, Sansa Stark said. Not without the North's consent. And Jon Snow will not go south to be made a fool. Sansa Stark's gaze swept the hall like a blade. But the dead are real. If you doubt that, you can go north and see them yourself. Lord Glover's mouth tightened. Fine words, Lord Glover muttered. But words don't stop dragons. Dragons don't stop White Walkers. Jon Snow felt a flicker of that strange heat under his skin at the word dragons. Jon Snow forced it down. Dragons can burn whites, Jon Snow said. Dragonglass can kill White Walkers. We need both. Davos Seaworth stepped forward, clearing his throat. If it helps, Davos Seaworth said. I've met kings and queens. Some are mad, some are cruel, and some might actually listen if you speak plain. Daenerys Targaryen. Davos Seaworth shrugged. I can't say what she'll be, but I can say she's not likely to come north unless someone asks her. And you'll ask her? Lord Glover said, eyes hard. By bowing. Jon Snow's fists clenched. I will go to Dragonstone, Jon Snow said, voice firm. The hall stilled, as if the words had drawn a line. I will speak to Daenerys Targaryen. I will tell Daenerys Targaryen about the dead. I will ask for Dragonglass. I will do what I must. Murmurs rose again, angry and afraid. Sansa Stark turned her head slightly, voice low enough only Jon Snow could hear. Don't make promises you can't keep, Sansa Stark murmured. Jon Snow met Sansa Stark's gaze for a heartbeat. In Sansa Stark's eyes, Jon Snow saw not only fear, but calculation. Sansa Stark was thinking ahead, as Sansa Stark always did now. Jon Snow looked back to the hall. I'm leaving Sansa Stark as Lady of Winterfell, Jon Snow said. Sansa Stark will rule in my absence. A rumble ran through the crowd. Some looked relieved. Some looked annoyed. A few looked directly at Sansa Stark with the respect of men who had watched Sansa Stark stand against Ramsay Bolton and survive. Sansa Stark's posture remained steady, but Jon Snow saw the slight tightening around Sansa Stark's mouth. Lord Glover's voice was rough. If you die down there, Lord Glover said, the North will be leaderless. The North won't be leaderless, Jon Snow said, glancing at Sansa Stark. Sansa Stark will be here. Lord Glover's eyes narrowed. And if Daenerys Targaryen demands your fealty? Jon Snow felt the hall's attention sharpen, 1,000 eyes turning into knives. Jon Snow's throat scars pulsed. Jon Snow felt the heat beneath his skin stir, as if the question itself had woken something. I will not sell the North, Jon Snow said clearly, but I will not let pride kill us either. Silence fell, heavy and tense. Then Tormund Giantsbane's voice boomed from the back, loud enough to rattle rafters. If Jon Snow says we need Dragonglass, we need Dragonglass. Tormund Giantsbane grinned, teeth bright in a wild beard. And if Jon Snow says we need a dragon queen, then we get a dragon queen. I've seen the dead. I've smelled them. I'd rather smell dragon breath than rot. A few men laughed nervously. The tension eased a fraction. Lady Mormont sat again, eyes still fierce. Jon Snow drew in a breath. I will leave in days, Jon Snow said. Any man who wants to come can speak to me after. If you want to stay and guard your lands, do it. But don't pretend the dead will respect your borders. Jon Snow stepped back. The meeting was over, but the arguments would continue. Jon Snow could feel them already, like bees under a skin. As the hall broke into clusters of murmuring lords and soldiers, Sansa Stark turned to Jon Snow, eyes hard. 2 days, Sansa Stark said quietly. Jon Snow nodded. The dead won't wait, Jon Snow said. Sansa Stark's gaze flicked to Bran Stark, then back to Jon Snow. Neither will the living, Sansa Stark murmured. Jon Snow wanted to tell Sansa Stark the truth, that Jon Snow's blood carried a name that could burn kingdoms. But Jon Snow could not. Not yet. Not when the North was already cracking under fear. Jon Snow watched the lords argue, watched Lyanna Mormont's small fierce face, watched Lord Glover's sullen glare. Jon Snow felt the weight of the North pressing down, heavy as snow on a roof. And beneath that weight, somewhere far away, something with wings beat once, slow and sure, and the echo of it thrummed in Jon Snow's chest. The crypts of Winterfell were colder than the world above. Down there, the air held the damp chill of stone that had never known sun, the quiet weight of centuries. Torches guttered in sconces, throwing uneven light across the faces of dead kings carved from granite. Shadows pooled between pillars. The smell was dust and old earth. Jon Snow walked with a lantern in his hand, the flame trembling as if even fire did not like the dark. Ghost padded beside him, silent, pale fur catching the lantern glow. The direwolf's eyes reflected red, making him look like something half myth, half menace. Jon Snow had come here alone at first, needing the solitude of the dead. But solitude did not exist in Winterfell anymore. After only a few moments, Jon Snow heard footsteps behind him, soft, careful. Sansa Stark appeared from the stair, her face lit by torchlight, her cloak pulled tight. Arya Stark followed, moving like a shadow, one hand resting near her belt. "I thought you'd be here," Sansa Stark said, voice low. Jon Snow did not turn. Jon Snow stared at the stone faces of Stark kings, their eyes stern, their hands resting on swords that would never be drawn again. Arya Stark's voice was quiet. "You always come here when you're angry." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "I'm not angry." Arya Stark made a sound that suggested Arya Stark did not believe him.
Sansa Stark stepped closer.
The lantern light caught the tension around Sansa Stark's mouth. "You're leaving," Sansa Stark said. Jon Snow nodded once. Sansa Stark's voice sharpened. "You announced it in front of them like it was nothing, like you didn't care what it does to the North." Jon Snow turned then, the lantern swinging slightly, throwing shadows across Sansa Stark's face. "I care," Jon Snow said. "That's why I'm going." Sansa Stark's eyes flashed. "If you care, then you should stay. You should protect your people." "I am protecting them," Jon Snow said, "by getting Dragonglass, by getting an ally, by doing something other than waiting for the dead to arrive at our gate." Sansa Stark's hands clenched at Sansa Stark's sides. "And what if you don't come back?"
Sansa Stark demanded.
"What if Daenerys Targaryen decides you're a threat? What if she takes you prisoner? What if she burns you?" Jon Snow flinched at the word burns, the strange heat under his skin stirring like an animal. Arya Stark's gaze snapped to Jon Snow. Arya Stark's voice was flat. "If she tries to burn Jon Snow, I'll kill her." Sansa Stark shot Arya Stark a sharp look.
"Arya Stark." Arya Stark shrugged.
"It's simple." Jon Snow felt a surge of affection so fierce it hurt. "No," Jon Snow said quietly. "No killing queens. Not yet."
Arya Stark's mouth twisted.
"I've killed worse than queens." Sansa Stark's eyes narrowed. "That's not something to be proud of."
Arya Starks Gase hardened.
"It kept me alive." Jon Snow held up a hand, stopping the argument before it could spiral. "I'm not leaving because I want to," Jon Snow said. "I'm leaving because I have to." Sansa Stark's breath came out in a tight cloud. "You always say that," Sansa Stark said. "You always put yourself in danger because you think you're the only one who can." Jon Snow's throat scars tightened. "I don't think that." Sansa Stark's eyes held Jon Snow's, and in them Jon Snow saw grief and anger and the deep fear of abandonment. "You do," Sansa Stark said softly. "You came back from death and you still don't know how to live. So you throw yourself into the next fight." The words struck deeper than Jon Snow wanted to admit. Jon Snow looked away, toward the tombs. Lyanna Stark's tomb was farther down, the stone carved with winter roses. Jon Snow's chest tightened at the sight.
Lyanna Stark.
A name Jon Snow had barely thought of before, a dead aunt remembered only in whispers in songs. Now Lyanna Stark's name was a thread tied around Jon Snow's throat, pulling. Jon Snow walked toward the tomb, lantern light shaking. Ghost followed. Sansa Stark and Arya Stark trailed behind, quieter now. Jon Snow stopped in front of Lyanna Stark's stone slab. The carved roses looked too delicate for stone. Jon Snow lifted the lantern, letting the light wash over the name. Lyanna Stark, it read. Beloved sister, daughter of Winterfell. Jon Snow's mouth went dry. I never knew her, Jon Snow whispered. Sansa Stark's voice was soft behind him. None of us did. Arya Stark stepped closer, eyes on the carving. People said she was wild, Arya Stark said. Like me. Jon Snow almost smiled, but it faltered. People say a lot. Jon Snow's hand lifted, hovering over the carved roses. Jon Snow did not touch, felt wrong like touching a wound. Was this the woman who had died for him? Was this the woman who had begged Eddard Stark to protect him, to hide him, to lie for him? Jon Snow felt suddenly sick, the weight of that sacrifice pressing down. I'm sorry, Jon Snow murmured, though Jon Snow did not know who the apology was for. Lyanna Stark, Eddard Stark himself, Ghost's head lowered, nose touching the stone lightly. The direwolf's breath fogged the carving. Sansa Stark's voice trembled, just slightly. Bran Stark told me, Sansa Stark said. Jon Snow stiffened. Told you what? Sansa Stark's eyes were fixed on Jon Snow, and Jon Snow realized with a sharp jolt that Sansa Stark knew. Maybe not all of it, but enough. Sansa Stark was not a child anymore. Sansa Stark had learned to read secrets in the way people avoided each other's eyes.
Sansa Stark swallowed.
Bran Stark said Eddard Stark lied to protect you, Sansa Stark said. Bran Stark said you're not, Sansa Stark's voice caught. Not what we thought. Arya Stark's head snapped toward Sansa Stark. You told her, Arya Stark hissed, glancing toward the stairs as if the dead might be listening.
Sansa Stark ignored Arya Stark.
Is it true? Sansa Stark demanded, voice barely above a whisper. Jon Snow, tell me, is it true? Jon Snow's body went rigid, as if the cold crypt air had turned Jon Snow to stone. Jon Snow stared at Lyanna Stark's name, at the carved roses, at the weight of history in letters. Jon Snow could not lie to Sansa Stark. Not after everything. Not after coming back. Jon Snow turned slowly. Yes, Jon Snow said, and the word felt like tearing something open. Sansa Stark's face went pale. Sansa Stark's eyes glistened, but Sansa Stark did not let tears fall. Who?
Sansa Stark whispered.
Jon Snow's throat scars tightened. Jon Snow forced the name out. Rhaegar Targaryen, Jon Snow said. Arya Stark's eyes widened, then narrowed. That's not possible, Arya Stark said. But Arya Stark's voice lacked conviction. Arya Stark had always believed in monsters more easily than in people. Sansa Stark's hand went to Sansa Stark's mouth, fingers pressing hard. All this time, Sansa Stark whispered. All this time. Jon Snow's voice was rough. Eddard Stark protected me, Jon Snow said. Eddard Stark gave me a life. Sansa Stark's eyes snapped up, sharp now. And this changes everything, Sansa Stark said. It changes Daenerys Targaryen. It changes the South. It changes what they will do to you. Sansa Stark's gaze flicked to the shadows of the crypt. It changes what the North will do. Jon Snow's stomach twisted. No one else will know, Jon Snow said. Not yet. Arya Stark's voice was fierce. No one will know, Arya Stark agreed, as if daring the world to try. Sansa Stark shook Sansa Stark's head, a small, incredulous motion. You're going to Dragonstone, Sansa Stark said, and the words sounded like doom. You're going to walk into a queen's hall with dragons above her roof. And you think this doesn't matter? Jon Snow's hands clenched. It matters, Jon Snow admitted. But the dead matter more. Sansa Stark's voice was tight. It always comes back to the dead with you. You always choose the world over your family. Jon Snow flinched. That's not fair. Sansa Stark's eyes flashed with pain. It's true. Arya Stark stepped between them, shoulders squared. Stop! Arya Stark snapped. Both of you. Arya Stark looked at Sansa Stark. Jon Snow is going because Jon Snow has to. You know that. And Jon Snow is not leaving us. Not again. We will make sure of it.
Sansa Stark's jaw clenched.
How? Arya Stark's expression was simple, fierce. By staying alive, Arya Stark said. By holding Winterfell. By not letting the North tear itself apart while Jon Snow is gone. Sansa Stark stared at Arya Stark, then at Jon Snow. Something in Sansa Stark's face shifted, resignation, perhaps, or acceptance of a truth Sansa Stark had been fighting. Sansa Stark drew in a breath. I will hold Winterfell, Sansa Stark said quietly. I will keep the lords in line. Jon Snow's chest loosened a fraction. Thank you, Jon Snow said. Sansa Stark's eyes were still fierce. Don't thank me, Sansa Stark said. Come back. Jon Snow nodded, though Jon Snow did not know if he could promise. A sound echoed down the crypt stair. Footsteps. Hurried. A guard appeared, breathless, torchlight flickering over the man's face. Jon Snow, the guard said, voice strained. A raven came from Eastwatch. The dead are moving faster than before. The guard swallowed. They've taken the last villages north of the wall. Silence fell, heavy as the stone around them. Jon Snow's fists tightened. How long? Jon Snow asked. The guard shook his head. They don't know, but soon. Sansa Stark's face hardened. Arya Stark's eyes went cold. Jon Snow felt that heat under his skin flare. Not comforting, but urgent, like a fire meant to forge steel. The dead were closer. There was no time to wait for the North to be ready. There was no time to argue with lords. There was no time to pretend Jon Snow was only one thing. Jon Snow looked at Sansa Stark. I leave at first light, Jon Snow said. Sansa Stark's lips parted as if to protest, then closed. Sansa Stark nodded once, sharp. Then I'll have everything ready, Sansa Stark said. Arya Stark stepped closer and pressed something into Jon Snow's hand. Jon Snow looked down. It was a small shard of dragonglass, black and sharp, wrapped in cloth. I took it from the stores, Arya Stark said. For luck. Jon Snow stared at it, the black glass catching lantern light like a frozen flame. Where did you?
Arya Stark shrugged.
I find things. Jon Snow closed Jon Snow's fingers around the shard. It was cold. Felt heavier than it should. Sansa Stark looked at the shard, then at Jon Snow's face. Don't let them change you, Sansa Stark whispered. Jon Snow's throat tightened. They already have, Jon Snow said, too quietly. Ghost rose, stepping closer as if sensing the moment's weight. The direwolf's breath steamed. Jon Snow looked once more at Lyanna Stark's tomb, at the carved winter roses, and felt the strange pull of blood and destiny like a hook in his chest. Jon Snow turned toward the stairs. We go, Jon Snow said, and as Jon Snow climbed out of the crypts into the cold above, the heat beneath Jon Snow's skin did not fade. It burned steady, a promise and a warning. Winterfell receded behind them like a dream that was already trying to turn itself into memory. The day Jon Snow left, the sky was the color of old steel and the wind had teeth. Snow had stopped, but the world was still pale, the ground crusted with white that cracked under hooves. Men stood on the walls and in the yard watching, silent, as if speaking might make the leaving real. Jon Snow rode at the front, cloak snapping behind, Longclaw at his hip. Davos Seaworth rode beside him on a smaller horse that looked as weathered as Davos Seaworth himself. A handful of northern men followed, not many, just enough to keep wolves and bandits away. Tormund Giantsbane had insisted on coming, then changed his mind at the last moment with a grunt that sounded suspiciously like reluctance. I'd follow you into a dragon's mouth, Tormund Giantsbane had said, slapping Jon Snow's shoulder hard enough to jolt bones. But you need someone here who knows how to kill the dead when they come. Sansa Stark will need me. Sansa Stark had not argued with that. On the wall walkway above the gate, Sansa Stark stood with Arya Stark and Bran Stark. Sansa Stark's face was a mask, but Jon Snow could see the strain under it. Arya Stark's posture was coiled, as if Arya Stark wanted to leap down and force Jon Snow to stay. Bran Stark watched with that calm distance that made Jon Snow's skin prickle. Jon Snow looked up as Jon Snow rode out. Sansa Stark lifted a gloved hand in farewell. Arya Stark did not wave. Arya Stark simply stared at Jon Snow, fierce and unwavering, a silent vow. Bran Stark's eyes met Jon Snow's, and Bran Stark's voice drifted down, carried by wind. "You'll know when you hear it," Bran Stark said. Jon Snow's throat tightened. Jon Snow nodded once, then turned forward. The gatehouse swallowed them and spat them out into the open world. Ghost ran beside Jon Snow's horse, silent, the direwolf's paws barely leaving prints. The sight of Ghost running free was like a piece of Jon Snow's heart walking outside Jon Snow's chest. Sailors might not like it. Southerners might fear it. Jon Snow did not care. They rode south through the north, through lands that still smelled of smoke from old battles. Villages lay half rebuilt, roofs patched, fields neglected. People watched from doorways, eyes wary, faces pinched by hunger and winter. Some bowed their heads as Jon Snow passed. Some simply stared as if trying to decide if Jon Snow was a savior or a fool. At night, they made camp in hollows sheltered from wind. Fires were kept small. Men huddled close, murmuring, sharpening blades. Ghost lay near Jon Snow, a pale sentinel. Davos Seaworth sat with Jon Snow sometimes, sharing food, offering quiet company that asked for nothing. On the third night, as snow fell again in lazy spirals, Davos Seaworth spoke softly into the darkness. "You look like a man walking toward a cliff," Davos Seaworth said. Jon Snow stared into the fire. The flames licked at wood, orange and hungry. Jon Snow felt the heat on Jon Snow's face, and beneath that, the other heat that never left now. "I am walking toward a cliff," Jon Snow said. Davos Seaworth made a small sound, somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. "I've walked toward a few," Davos Seaworth said. "Usually because some king told me it was for the greater good." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "And was it?" Davos Seaworth's gaze drifted to the darkness beyond the firelight. "Sometimes," Davos Seaworth said. "Sometimes it was just for pride." Jon Snow's hands tightened around Jon Snow's cup. "This isn't pride." Davos Seaworth nodded slowly. "No," Davos Seaworth agreed. "No, it's not. But there are people down south who will see you coming and think it is. Or think it's ambition." Davos Seaworth hesitated. Samwell Tarly's words. "What Samwell Tarly told you." Jon Snow's voice went sharp. "Don't." Davos Seaworth held up both hands in a placating gesture. "All right," Davos Seaworth said softly. "All right, but listen to an old smuggler for a moment. Secrets have a way of spilling, especially secrets that could make men rich or powerful." Jon Snow stared at the fire until the orange blurred. "I don't want power," Jon Snow said. Davos Seaworth's voice was gentle. "Most people who end up with it don't," Davos Seaworth said. "Or at least they don't think they do." Jon Snow's throat scars tightened. Jon Snow wanted to argue, but words felt useless against the weight in Jon Snow's chest. Instead, Jon Snow said, "Have you ever seen a dragon?" Davos Seaworth blinked, surprised by the shift. Davos Seaworth chuckled softly. "No," Davos Seaworth admitted. "Not unless you count the painted ones on banners. But I've heard stories. Sailors talk. They say dragons make the air smell like burnt metal and lightning before you even see them." Jon Snow felt a flicker in Jon Snow's blood at the words. Burnt metal. Lightning. It sounded too much like the feeling behind Jon Snow's ribs. Davos Seaworth watched Jon Snow carefully. "You're thinking about them," Davos Seaworth said. Jon Snow's gaze stayed on the fire. "I've been dreaming about them." Davos Seaworth's eyebrows rose. "Dreaming?" Jon Snow nodded once. "Before Samwell Tarly came, Before Bran Stark said anything, I saw. Jon Snow stopped. Jon Snow did not know how to describe it without sounding mad. I saw wings, Jon Snow said finally. I heard a roar. Davos Seaworth's mouth tightened. Could be nothing, Davos Seaworth said cautiously. Jon Snow's voice was low. It doesn't feel like nothing. Ghost lifted his head then, ears pricked, and stared into the darkness beyond the firelight. Jon Snow followed Ghost's gaze. The night was thick. Snow fell. Trees stood like black spears. And yet Jon Snow felt, just for a moment, as if something far away had turned toward him. Jon Snow slept that night, or something like sleep. The dream came quick, dragging Jon Snow under like a wave. Jon Snow stood on a cliff of black glass. The air was warm and wet with salt. Below, the sea churned, dark and restless. Behind Jon Snow loomed a castle of jagged stone, ancient and sharp as teeth. Dragonstone. Jon Snow knew it without being told. The sky above was heavy with clouds, but there was a red glow beneath them, as if the world itself smoldered. Jon Snow could smell sulfur and ash. Jon Snow's skin prickled with heat. Then the roar came. It rolled through the air, deep and vast, making Jon Snow's bones vibrate. Jon Snow turned toward the sound and saw a shadow moving through cloud, massive wings slicing the sky. Another shadow followed, and another, 3 shapes circling like storms. Jon Snow's heart hammered. One of the shadows dropped lower, breaking through cloud. A dragon, huge, scales dark, eyes like molten gold, swept toward Jon Snow. The dragon's wings beat once, and the force of it nearly knocked Jon Snow off his feet. The dragon's breath washed over Jon Snow like heat from an open furnace. Jon Snow should have been afraid. Jon Snow was not. Jon Snow felt something in Jon Snow's chest respond, like a door opening. The dragon's head lowered, eyes narrowing. The dragon looked at Jon Snow not like prey, not like a stranger, but like recognition. Jon Snow reached out a hand. The dragon's nose was close enough to touch. Jon Snow could see the texture of scale, the small scars, the way smoke curled from the dragon's nostrils. Jon Snow's fingers brushed the dragon's hide. Heat surged through Jon Snow, blinding. Jon Snow woke with a gasp, sitting upright in the snow, breath steaming. The campfire was low, embers red. Men slept around him, bundled. Davos Seaworth snored softly. Ghost stood over Jon Snow, eyes glowing red in the dark. Jon Snow's hand was still outstretched, fingers trembling as if they had truly touched something. Jon Snow pressed the hand to Jon Snow's chest. The heat was there, steady and real. Jon Snow stared into the darkness beyond the camp, toward the south, toward a black stone island Jon Snow had never seen and yet felt as if Jon Snow could find with eyes closed. In the far distance, thunder rumbled. Not in the sky above the camp, but somewhere beyond it, somewhere over the horizon. Jon Snow did not know if it was storm or imagination. But Ghost's ears flattened, and the direwolf let out a low, uneasy growl. White Harbor smelled like salt and fish and wet rope. After days of road and snow and mud, the sight of the sea was a shock. Vast, gray, restless, stretching away under a sky that matched it in color. Waves slapped against the piers, cold and insistent. Seagulls wheeled above, screaming like they were angry at the world. The city itself crouched behind walls, its buildings dark with damp, chimneys smoking. Men moved with purpose along the docks, hauling crates, shouting orders, tying lines. The Manderley banners, silver mermen on blue, hung limp in the wet air. Jon Snow stood near the end of a pier, cloak pulled tight, Ghost at his side. The direwolf's paws were wet from the boards. Ghost's nose twitched, catching the unfamiliar smells. Ghost's body was tense, muscles coiled, as if the sea itself were a threat. Davos Seaworth watched the activity with a familiar ease, like a man stepping into an old life. Davos Seaworth's eyes flicked to ships, to rigging, to the way men moved. Davos Seaworth looked almost younger here, as if salt air had woken something in him. Wyman Manderley approached with a small entourage, his bulk wrapped in rich furs, his face ruddy and wet with mist. Wyman Manderley's eyes were sharp despite the softness of his body. Wyman Manderley looked at Jon Snow with the calculating gaze of a man who had survived by knowing when to smile and when to bite. "Jon Snow," Wyman Manderley said, voice booming with practiced warmth. "Or should I say, Your Grace?" Jon Snow's mouth tightened at the title. "Lord Wyman Manderley," Jon Snow said. "Thank you for meeting me." Wyman Manderley spread his hands. "Anytime the king in the north comes to White Harbor, I make time," Wyman Manderley said. Wyman Manderley's gaze flicked to Ghost, and for a heartbeat there was a flicker of fear, quickly masked. "And any time a dire wolf comes, I pray my fish are fast enough." A few men chuckled nervously. Ghost's ears flattened, but Ghost did not move. Davos Seaworth stepped in, smiling. "Lord Wyman Manderley," Davos Seaworth said, "we're grateful for your ships." Wyman Manderley's eyes narrowed. "Ships are expensive," Wyman Manderley said, "and winter makes them more so. Storms, ice." Wyman Manderley shrugged one massive shoulder. "But the North needs Dragonglass, you say? The North needs allies. So, ships." Jon Snow nodded. "I'll pay what I can," Jon Snow said, though Jon Snow had little to offer beyond promises. Wyman Manderley waved a hand. "Keep your coin," Wyman Manderley said. "I'll take something else." Jon Snow's eyes sharpened. "What?" Wyman Manderley's gaze held Jon Snow's. "Bring back an agreement," Wyman Manderley said. "Bring back Dragonglass. Bring back proof that dragons can be made to fight for us, not against us." Wyman Manderley leaned in slightly, voice lowering. "Bring back hope." Hope. The word tasted dangerous. Jon Snow nodded slowly. "I'll try," Jon Snow said. Wyman Manderley's mouth twisted. "Try," Wyman Manderley repeated, as if the W word amused him. "In the North, we don't have much use for try. We have do or die." Jon Snow's scars itched. "I know," Jon Snow said. Wyman Manderley's gaze flicked to Davos Seaworth. "And you," Wyman Manderley said. "An onion knight in my harbor. Strange days." Davos Seaworth gave a small bow. "Stranger than you know," Davos Seaworth said. Wyman Manderley chuckled, then gestured toward a ship moored nearby. It was not large, but it was sturdy, its hull dark and solid, its sails furled against the wet wind. "That one," Wyman Manderley said. "Fast enough, strong enough. The captain owes me a favor and fears me more than the sea." Jon Snow looked at the ship. The sea beyond rolled, gray and cold. Jon Snow felt an uneasy pull in Jon Snow's chest at the sight of open water. Davos Seaworth clapped Jon Snow's arm. "It'll be fine," Davos Seaworth murmured. "I've been in worse." Jon Snow glanced at Davos Seaworth. "You've been shipwrecked." Davos Seaworth smiled thinly. "I," Davos Seaworth said, "and I lived. That's the important part." As preparations were made, Jon Snow walked along the pier, watching men load barrels of salted meat, sacks of grain, bundles of furs. Northern soldiers checked weapons. A few sailors eyed Ghost warily and crossed themselves. Jon Snow stopped near the edge, looking out at the water. The sea was not like the North snowfields. The sea moved constantly, shifting, alive. It had no patience for walls or borders. Jon Snow had sailed once before, to Hard Home, and the memory still sat like a stone in Jon Snow's stomach. The cold spray, the desperate screaming, the dead hands reaching from the surf. Ghost stood beside Jon Snow, staring at the waves as if the direwolf expected something to rise from them. "Not your kind of water," Davos Seaworth said quietly, coming to stand beside Jon Snow. Jon Snow did not look away. "No," Jon Snow said. Davos Seaworth's voice was thoughtful. "There's something about the sea," Davos Seaworth said. "It makes you feel small, makes you remember you can't control everything." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "I don't want to control everything." Davos Seaworth glanced at Jon Snow, eyebrow raised. "No," Davos Seaworth said softly. You just want to keep everyone alive. Jon Snow's breath came out slow. Someone has to try. Davos Seaworth chuckled. There it is again, Davos Seaworth said. Try. Jon Snow's gaze stayed on the horizon. The sky and sea met in a blurred line. Somewhere beyond that line was Dragonstone. Somewhere beyond that line was Daenerys Targaryen. Somewhere beyond that line were dragons. Jon Snow felt that heat under Jon Snow's skin stir at the thought, like a living thing waking. That night, they slept aboard the ship. The cabin Davos Seaworth arranged for Jon Snow was small, cramped, smelling of tar and damp wood. Jon Snow lay on a narrow bunk, cloak folded under Jon Snow's head. Ghost lay on the floor, too large for the space, his body pressed against the door like a guard. The ship creaked around them, ropes groaning, water slapping the hull. The motion made Jon Snow's stomach roll. Jon Snow closed Jon Snow's eyes, and the darkness behind them filled at once with fire. The dream was different this time. Jon Snow was not on a cliff, but in a long stone corridor lit by red light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The walls were black and slick, like obsidian. The air smelled of smoke and salt. A voice whispered in a language Jon Snow did not know and yet somehow understood. The words curled around Jon Snow's mind like heat around skin. Blood of my blood. Jon Snow turned, searching, but saw only shadow and red light. Then a sound, wings, slow and heavy. Jon Snow looked up, and the ceiling vanished. The corridor opened into sky, storm-dark and vast. A dragon's shadow passed overhead. Jon Snow felt the pull in Jon Snow's chest become a tug, a demand. Jon Snow woke abruptly, sitting up, breath ragged. The cabin was dark. Ghost's eyes glowed red. Outside, the sea roared against the pier. Wind howled through rigging. Jon Snow pressed a hand to Jon Snow's chest. The heat was there, steady, insistent. Jon Snow did not sleep again. Jon Snow lay listening to the ship's creaks, to the sea's restless voice, and thought about a black stone island that seemed to call Jon Snow's blood like a song. In the early hours before dawn, as the ship's crew moved quietly to prepare for departure, Jon Snow stepped onto the deck. The air was wet and cold. Mist clung to the water. The city lights of White Harbor glimmered behind, soft and distant. Jon Snow looked south, and for a moment on the far horizon, Jon Snow thought Jon Snow saw a faint red glow under the clouds, like fire hidden behind stone. The sea did not welcome them. On the first day, the water was restless but manageable, rolling under the ship like a creature shifting in sleep. The wind filled the sails in uneven gusts. The crew moved with the practiced rhythm of men who had lived their lives at the mercy of weather. Davos Seaworth spoke with the captain in low tones, pointing at cloud formations, at the line of the coast. Jon Snow listened without understanding, trying to learn a language of wind and wave that was not Jon Snow's. Ghost hated it. The direwolf's paws slid on the wet deck at first, claws scraping wood. Ghost moved in tense, careful steps, ears pinned back, eyes narrowing at the sea as if it were an enemy that could not be bitten. When the ship rolled, Ghost's body swayed like a wolf adjusting to ice, but there was no ease in it. Ghost stayed close to Jon Snow, pressed against Jon Snow's leg whenever the deck tilted, as if anchoring Jon Snow with weight. By the second day, the wind sharpened, clouds thickened, the horizon vanished behind gray curtains of rain. The ship's wood groaned louder. Sailors moved faster, voices raised. Davos Seaworth approached Jon Snow near the bow. Davos Seaworth's face was wet with spray. His beard darkened. "Storm coming," Davos Seaworth said tersely. Jon Snow glanced at the sky. The clouds were low and heavy, like a ceiling about to drop. "Can't we turn back?" Jon Snow asked, though Jon Snow knew the answer. Davos Seaworth shook his head. "Not without risking worse," Davos Seaworth said. "We ride it." Jon Snow nodded, jaw tight. When the storm hit, it hit like a fist. Wind screamed through rigging. Rain lashed sideways. Waves rose in dark walls and crashed over the bow, sending sheets of freezing water across the deck. The ship pitched and rolled so violently Jon Snow's stomach twisted, bile rising. Men shouted, voices torn away by wind. The captain's orders were swallowed. Jon Snow gripped the rail until Jon Snow's fingers went numb. The wood was slick, cold. Salt spray stung Jon Snow's eyes. Jon Snow's cloak whipped like a living thing trying to tear free. Ghost braced himself against the deck, legs spread, claws digging in. The direwolf's lips curled back, teeth bared at the sea as if daring it. Lightning flashed, splitting the sky. Thunder followed, so loud it made Jon Snow's bones vibrate. In that vibration, Jon Snow felt something else, something that was not thunder. A deeper pulse, slower, like the beat of enormous wings in the far distance. Jon Snow shook Jon Snow's head, trying to clear it. The storm was too loud for dreams, too real for visions. And yet the feeling persisted, the heat under Jon Snow's skin flaring with each crash of thunder, as if Jon Snow's blood recognized the sound. A wave slammed into the side of the ship. The deck tilted hard. Jon Snow's feet slid. Jon Snow would have fallen if not for Ghost's sudden shove. Ghost's shoulder hit Jon Snow's thigh, steadying him, pushing him back against the rail. Jon Snow grabbed Ghost's fur, fingers sinking in, and for a heartbeat the world steadied. "Hold on," Davos Seaworth shouted, appearing beside Jon Snow, his voice raw. Davos Seaworth grabbed a rope and yanked, muscles straining. Davos Seaworth's eyes met Jon Snow's briefly, fierce and focused. "Don't let go." Jon Snow wanted to shout that Jon Snow would not. Instead, Jon Snow swallowed salt water and tasted iron. Another wave crashed. A sailor screamed as a loose barrel rolled and struck his leg. Men scrambled, dragging the barrel back, tying it down. The captain's face was a pale blur under rain. Jon Snow's mind flickered, unbidden, to the wall, to blizzards, to the way wind there could carve skin raw. This storm felt different, wetter, heavier, but the violence was familiar. The world could always kill you if it wanted. Jon Snow had died once already. Jon Snow did not intend to die again on a ship. The storm raged for hours that felt like days. The sky stayed dark. Rain hammered down. The ship fought, creaking, shuddering. Davos Seaworth moved like a man possessed, helping sailors, shouting, pulling ropes, using hands that had once smuggled onions through a siege and now fought to keep a king alive. At some point, Jon Snow realized Jon Snow's lips were moving. Not prayer, not curses, words that felt old, strange on the tongue. Jon Snow did not know where they came from. Jon Snow barely noticed until a sailor glanced at him, eyes wide, then crossed himself and hurried away. Jon Snow stopped speaking at once, shocked. "What was that?" Davos Seaworth demanded, leaning close, voice barely audible over wind. Jon Snow stared, rain streaming down Jon Snow's face. "Nothing," Jon Snow shouted back. "I didn't." A crack of thunder swallowed the rest. The storm began to break in the late afternoon. The rain thinned. The wind eased from a scream to a howl. The waves lowered, though the sea still rolled with angry swells. The crew moved like exhausted ghosts, faces gray, hands raw. Davos Seaworth leaned against the mast, chest heaving, water dripping from his beard. Jon Snow's arms shook from holding on. Ghost's fur was soaked, clinging to muscle, but the direwolf stood steady, eyes still fixed on the horizon as if expecting another attack. The captain approached, wiping water from his eyes. "We made it," the captain rasped, voice rough with salt. "Seven take me, we made it." Davos Seaworth exhaled a shaky laugh. "Told you," Davos Seaworth muttered to Jon Snow, voice hoarse. "I've been in worse." Jon Snow tried to smile, but Jon Snow's stomach lurched again as the ship rolled. Jon Snow swallowed, forcing the bile down. "That was worse," Jon Snow said. Davos Seaworth chuckled weakly. Davos Seaworth agreed. As the clouds began to lift, the horizon sharpened. The sea's gray surface reflected pale light, and then Jon Snow saw it. At first it was a jagged silhouette in the distance, black against a lighter sky. Then it resolved into towers and cliffs, sharp spines of rock rising from the sea. Dragonstone. The castle looked like it had been carved by a giant's hand. Jagged, ancient, almost alive. Its towers were shaped like dragons' jaws, their teeth reaching upward. Smoke rose faintly from somewhere on the island, thin and dark. Jon Snow's chest tightened. The heat under Jon Snow's skin flared, sudden and fierce, like someone had opened a furnace door inside Jon Snow's ribs. Ghost's head lifted higher, ears pricked, body going rigid. The dire wolf let out a low rumble, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Davos Seaworth followed Jon Snow's gaze. Davos Seaworth's expression went solemn. "There it is," Davos Seaworth said softly. Jon Snow nodded once, unable to speak. The ship sailed closer, cutting through swells. The air changed. The salt smell remained, but something else threaded through it. Sulfur, faint but distinct, like old fire. Jon Snow breathed it in, and the heat inside Jon Snow answered like recognition. As Dragonstone grew larger, Jon Snow thought Jon Snow heard something over the sea. A distant rumble that could have been thunder, but the sky above was clearing now. The sound was low, deep, rolling. Jon Snow's heart beat harder, matching it. Davos Seaworth frowned, listening. "Do you hear that?" Davos Seaworth asked. Jon Snow's mouth was dry. "Yes," Jon Snow said. The rumble came again, clearer now, and this time there was no mistaking the shape of it. It was not thunder. It was a roar. The sound rolled over the water like a wave, making the sailors freeze. Men looked up. One crossed himself. Another whispered a prayer. The captain's face went pale. Ghost's hackles rose. The direwolf's teeth bared in a silent snarl. Jon Snow stood frozen, rainwater dripping from Jon Snow's hair, staring at the black stone island. The roar echoed in Jon Snow's bones as if it had traveled through Jon Snow's blood instead of the air. Jon Snow felt, with sudden certainty, that the sound was not only heard. It was felt. It was calling. They approached Dragonstone at dusk, when the sky was a smear of bruised purple and dull gold and the sea reflected it like tarnished metal. The island rose from the water with no softness. Black cliffs cut straight up, slick with spray. Dark stone steps climbed from the docks toward the castle above, winding like a spine. Torches burned along the dock, their flames bright against wet rock, smoke curling upward into the heavy air. As the ship drew close, Jon Snow saw the figures waiting. They stood in formation on the dock, unmoving as statues. Dark-skinned men in gray armor, spears upright, faces impassive. Unsullied, Jon Snow had heard the name in whispered reports, had imagined an army of slaves turned soldiers. Seeing them was different. They did not fidget. They did not glance around. They looked as if they could stand through winter without blinking. At their front stood a tall man with close-cropped hair and a rigid posture. His eyes were hard, assessing. Grey Worm. Beside Grey Worm stood a woman with brown skin and gentle posture, her face composed but curious. Missandei of Noth. Her eyes flicked from Jon Snow to Ghost, and Jon Snow saw a flash of surprise, then caution. Davos Seaworth exhaled slowly. "Well," Davos Seaworth murmured, "that's an army." Jon Snow's boots hit the dock with a dull thud as Jon Snow stepped off the ship. The wood was slick. The air smelled of salt and sulfur, stronger now. Jon Snow's stomach rolled. Not from the sea's motion, but from the weight of standing on this black stone, the feeling of stepping onto a place that was older than most kingdoms. Ghost leapt down beside Jon Snow, landing soundlessly. The direwolf's paws made no sound on wet stone. Ghost's body was tense, head lifted, nose working. Ghost's eyes were fixed upward, toward the castle towers that clawed at the sky. Grey Worm stepped forward. Grey Worm's voice was accented, controlled. "Jon Snow," Grey Worm said. "King in the North." Jon Snow's mouth tightened at the title. "Yes," Jon Snow said. "And you are?" "Grey Worm," Grey Worm said. Grey Worm's eyes flicked to Ghost, and for the first time Jon Snow saw something like unease in Grey Worm's expression. "You brought an animal." Ghost's lips lifted slightly, showing a hint of teeth. Jon Snow's hand moved to Ghost's fur automatically, steadying. "Ghost is not a danger," Jon Snow said, "unless someone makes Ghost one." Grey Worm's eyes narrowed, but Grey Worm did not flinch. "Daenerys Targaryen has agreed to meet you," Grey Worm said, "but there are rules. You will not bring weapons into the castle." Davos Seaworth stepped forward, palms out, smiling that careful smile of a man used to talking past guards. "Of course," Davos Seaworth said. "We mean no harm. We came to speak." Missandei of Noth stepped closer, her voice soft but clear. "I am Missandei of Noth," Missandei of Noth said. "I will take you to Daenerys Targaryen." Jon Snow nodded once. "Thank you," Jon Snow said. "Missa." Day of Noth's gaze lingered on Jon Snow's face, then on Jon Snow's throat scars. There was no pity in Missandei of Noth's eyes, only attention, as if Missandei of Noth were reading a story written in flesh. Davos Seaworth unbuckled his sword and held it out. Grey Worm took it without comment. Jon Snow's hand went to Longclaw's hilt. For a heartbeat, Jon Snow hesitated. Longclaw was more than steel. Longclaw was a piece of the life Jon Snow had built. Giving it up felt like stepping naked into a den of wolves. But Jon Snow forced Jon Snow's fingers to loosen. Jon Snow unbuckled Longclaw and held it out. Grey Worm accepted it, expression unreadable. Ghost remained at Jon Snow's side, unarmed in the way only beasts could be. Missandei of Noth turned and began to lead them up the stone steps. Unsullied fell into position, spears steady. Grey Worm walked at the front, posture rigid. As they climbed, the air grew warmer, strangely. Jon Snow's breath still steamed, but less. The smell of sulfur strengthened. The stone under Jon Snow's boots was slick and dark, and when Jon Snow placed a gloved hand against the wall for balance, Jon Snow felt a faint warmth beneath the surface, like a hearthstone that had held heat all day. Dragonstone was alive with old fire. They passed carved gargoyles shaped like dragons, their mouths open in silent roars. The castle walls were black and jagged, as if the builders had melted stone and poured it into shapes. It was unlike Winterfell's blunt practicality. This place was a monument to something wilder. Jon Snow's skin prickled. That heat under Jon Snow's ribs pulsed in time with Jon Snow's heartbeat, stronger with each step, as if the castle itself were drawing it out. Ghost growled low, not at the Unsullied, not at Missandei of Noth, but at the air. Davos Seaworth leaned closer to Jon Snow, voice barely a whisper. "Keep your head," Davos Seaworth murmured. "Don't say anything about..." Davos Seaworth stopped, not daring to name it. Not daring to name the thing Samwell Tarly had found in a book and Bran Stark had confirmed with an empty-eyed certainty. Jon Snow nodded. They reached a courtyard sheltered from wind. Torches burned along the walls. A few Dothraki stood watching, their braided hair adorned with bells, their eyes dark and curious. Jon Snow felt their gaze like knives. A northern king was a strange thing here. Then the shadow passed. It moved across the courtyard stones, vast and swift, blotting out torchlight for a heartbeat. Men froze. Unsullied did not break formation, but their heads tilted slightly upward. A Dothraki muttered something under his breath. Ghost's body went rigid. The direwolf's growl deepened. Jon Snow's head snapped up. Above, low clouds drifted past the castle's jagged towers. Through them, a shape moved, wings cutting the mist, enormous and sure. A roar split the air. It was louder than on the sea, closer, vibrating through stone and flesh. The sound rolled through Jon Snow like thunder through a mountain. Jon Snow felt it in Jon Snow's teeth, in Jon Snow's ribs, in the scars on Jon Snow's throat. Jon Snow's breath caught. The roar did not feel like a warning, felt like a question. Jon Snow stood frozen, staring into cloud, and the heat under Jon Snow's skin surged, answering without Jon Snow's consent. like a flame leaping toward oxygen. For a heartbeat, Jon Snow felt something else. An awareness that was not Jon Snow's, heavy and ancient and fierce, turning toward him with sudden attention. Jon Snow's vision blurred at the edges. Jon Snow's hand went to Jon Snow's chest as if to hold the heat in, as if to keep Jon Snow's heart from leaping out. Missandei of Noth glanced back, startled, seeing Jon Snow's reaction. Grey Worm's eyes narrowed. Davos Seaworth's mouth was slightly open, his face pale. "Seven hells," Davos Seaworth breathed. Ghost's ears flattened, but Ghost did not retreat. The direwolf's eyes were fixed upward, bright with challenge. The roar faded into the thick air, echoing off black stone and disappearing into the sea wind. Jon Snow forced Jon Snow's breath back into Jon Snow's lungs. Jon Snow lowered Jon Snow's hand slowly. Missandei of Noth's voice was careful. "The dragons are restless," Missandei of Noth said. "They do not like strangers." Jon Snow's mouth was dry. Jon Snow's voice came out low and hoarse. "I know," Jon Snow said, because Jon Snow did know. Not with reason, not with logic, with blood and bone. The dragons were not only restless. The dragons had noticed, and somewhere above, in cloud and fire, something with wings circled once more, and Jon Snow felt the turn of it like the turning of a key in a lock. The steps climbed like a spine into the belly of the island, each one slick with salt and mist. Jon Snow's boots found purchase by habit more than certainty, and every footfall rang wrong against the black stone, too sharp, too exposed, as if Dragonstone took note of every man who dared tread its bones. The torchlight did not warm the passage. It only made the wet walls glisten, turning water to amber streaks that bled down obsidian like melted gold. The air tasted of sulfur, faint, persistent, mixed with the iron tang of sea spray. Jon Snow inhaled and felt that other heat stir beneath his skin, answering the smell as if it were a summons. Grey Worm walked ahead without looking back, shoulders squared, spear held with the disciplined ease of a man for whom violence was prayer. Unsullied soldiers flanked the stair in quiet symmetry, faces impassive, eyes forward. They did not glance at Ghost the direwolf, but Jon Snow saw their fingers tighten on spear shafts whenever Ghost's claws scraped stone. Missandei of Noth led them, cloak drawn tight, her pace steady. Missandei of Noth moved like someone who belonged here, like the black stone and salt wind were familiar companions. Missandei of Noth's gaze was alert but not hostile, as if Missandei of Noth were curious what kind of man would cross half a kingdom to speak to Daenerys Targaryen with nothing but cold truth in his hands. Davos Seaworth climbed beside Jon Snow, breathing harder than he would admit. The sea had left Davos Seaworth pale, and now the stair demanded payment too. Still, Davos Seaworth's eyes were alive with the sharp calculation of a sailor reading current and threat. "This place looks like it wants to bite," Davos Seaworth muttered, voice low enough that it vanished under the sound of boots and distant wind. "It might," Jon Snow replied, and surprised himself with the certainty. Dragonstone felt less like a castle than a creature, ancient and awake, watching from its dark corners. Ghost pressed close to Jon Snow's leg as they climbed, fur damp, body tense. The direwolf's nose twitched constantly, tasting the air. Ghost's ears flattened whenever that low rumble came again, deep rolling, so low it could have been thunder trapped in stone. A dragon roar. Jon Snow's spine prickled each time it sounded, not with fear, with recognition so sharp it made Jon Snow's teeth ache. The stair opened into a narrow corridor lined with carved stone shapes. Dragons, their mouths open, teeth jagged, eyes hollow in the torchlight. Their bodies coiled along the wall like a warning. Jon Snow's breath steamed, but less now. The air here was warmer than it had any right to be. They passed Dothraki warriors lounging in shadowed archways, their braided hair adorned with bells that did not ring, their eyes dark and measuring. The Dothraki watched Jon Snow with the same interest men gave a blade they were deciding whether to respect or steal. A few glanced at Ghost and murmured to each other in a language Jon Snow did not know. Ghost bared teeth in a silent, brief warning, then turned his head away with the deliberate contempt of a predator refusing to acknowledge prey. Missandei of Noth paused at a set of tall doors bound with iron. The doors were carved with dragon scales, each ridge catching torchlight. Grey Worm lifted a hand. Unsullied stepped forward, pushing the doors open with practiced precision. Warm air spilled out, carrying the scent of smoke and candles and something else. Something like heat after lightning. Jon Snow felt that coal under his ribs flare, a sudden bright hunger that had no place in a man's chest. Beyond the doors lay a great chamber lit by firelight and brazier glow, the black stone walls rising high into shadow. In the center stood a table, enormous, carved and painted, its surface shaped like the lands of Westeros. The painted table. Jon Snow had heard of it in stories and old chronicles. Seeing it in person was like seeing the world reduced to something men could fight over with their fingers. Torches burned in iron sconces. Shadows moved at the edges of the hall. And at the far end, beyond the table's carved coastlines and mountain ridges, a figure waited. Not on a throne of blades. Dragonstone's hall held no iron throne, but on a raised platform, where a dark stone seat sat beneath the carved jaws of a dragon. Daenerys Targaryen. Jon Snow's chest tightened, not with awe, but with the sudden weight of being seen. Daenerys Targaryen did not stand. Daenerys Targaryen watched from the seat like a queen judging an offering. Silver hair fell in braids over Daenerys Targaryen's shoulders. Daenerys Targaryen's face was pale and sharp, eyes purple-dark in the torchlight, calm and cold as if Daenerys Targaryen had learned to freeze fear into obedience. Daenerys Targaryen wore a dark coat lined with fur, the cut severe, the leather worked with small dragon scales. Daenerys Targaryen's hands rested on the arms of the chair, as if the stone itself belonged to Daenerys Targaryen. Around Daenerys Targaryen stood advisors and guards. Jon Snow recognized Tyrion Lannister at once, small but unmistakable, his mismatched eyes alert and sardonic even in stillness. Varys stood nearby, soft and composed, hands folded, face unreadable in the way of a man who had learned to make secrecy look like peace. Jorah Mormont hovered at the edge like a shadow with a sword, older than Jon Snow remembered from rumors, his eyes fixed on Jon Snow with the wary intensity of someone watching a threat. Missandei of Noth stepped forward and bowed. Daenerys Targaryen, Missandei of Noth said, voice clear. Jon Snow has arrived. Grey Worm bowed too, sharp and precise. Jon Snow did not bow. Jon Snow stepped forward until Jon Snow stood at the edge of the painted table, the carved north beneath Jon Snow's hands if Jon Snow chose to reach for it. Ghost stopped at Jon Snow's side and sat, tail still, eyes locked on Daenerys Targaryen with an animal's blunt honesty. The hall held its breath. Daenerys Targaryen's gaze flicked to Ghost, then to Jon Snow's face, then to the scars on Jon Snow's throat. Something like interest stirred in Daenerys Targaryen's eyes, quickly smoothed into control. So, Daenerys Targaryen said, voice calm and carrying, the king in the north has come. The title struck Jon Snow like a thrown stone. It was meant to place him in a box, a curiosity from cold lands, an obstacle to be moved. Jon Snow's voice was steady. Jon Snow said, Lord of Winterfell. Tyrion Lannister's mouth twitched, amused by the refusal to play the game properly. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes narrowed a fraction. You took Winterfell, Daenerys Targaryen said. You were named king in the north. Jon Snow met Daenerys Targaryen's gaze without flinching. I was chosen by my people to protect them, Jon Snow said. I came to speak about what threatens us all. Daenerys Targaryen leaned back slightly, expression cool. Everything threatens us all, Daenerys Targaryen said. The world has been built on threats. And somewhere above, faint as a memory, a low rumble rolled through the stone, like distant thunder. Jon Snow felt it in his blood. Silence held for a heartbeat longer than comfort, the kind of silence that was not absence of sound but the presence of listening. Daenerys Targaryen's gaze lingered on Jon Snow's face as if Daenerys Targaryen expected Jon Snow to offer fealty the way men offered coin. reluctant but inevitable. When Jon Snow did not, Daenerys Targaryen's eyes sharpened, and the room seemed to draw tighter around them. "You have my attention," Daenerys Targaryen said finally. "Speak." Jon Snow took a breath. Jon Snow did not look away from Daenerys Targaryen because looking away would make Jon Snow smaller, and Jon Snow could not afford to be smaller. "There is an army coming," Jon Snow said. "An army of the dead." Tyrion Lannister's head tilted slightly, interest lighting one mismatched eye. Varys's face remained smooth, but Jon Snow saw the subtle narrowing of Varys's gaze, the shift of weight, attention sharpened. Jorah Mormont's jaw tightened, as if the words struck something old. Daenerys Targaryen did not blink. "I've heard stories," Daenerys Targaryen said. "The Night King, White Walkers, monsters in the snow." "They're not stories," Jon Snow said. Daenerys Targaryen's voice remained calm, but something colder edged it. "Everything is a story until it becomes a song," Daenerys Targaryen said. "And songs are useful when you want people afraid." Jon Snow felt anger flare, but Jon Snow held it down like a man holding a door against a storm. "If fear makes them prepare, then fear is useful," Jon Snow said. "But this isn't about songs. I fought them. I've watched men die and rise again with blue eyes and broken mouths. I've watched children ripped apart and dragged into the dark." A flicker crossed Daenerys Targaryen's face. Something like discomfort, quickly masked. Davos Seaworth stepped forward half a pace, hands open, voice rough with honesty. "Your Grace," Davos Seaworth said. "I've seen them too. I saw thousands of dead at Hardhome, and I'm not a man prone to believing in." Davos Seaworth gestured vaguely, searching for the word without insulting anyone's gods. "Miracles." Daenerys Targaryen's gaze slid to Davos Seaworth. "And yet you stand in my hall," Daenerys Targaryen said. Davos Seaworth swallowed. "Because we need Dragonglass," Davos Seaworth said, and the bluntness of it cut through the tension like a blade. "Dragonglass kills White Walkers. We have some in the north, but not enough. We need what's under Dragonstone." Tyrion Lannister's lips parted in a faint smile at Davos Seaworth's directness. "Dragonstone's Dragonglass," Tyrion Lannister murmured, as if tasting the phrase. Daenerys Targaryen's attention returned to Jon Snow. "You came for my Dragonglass," Daenerys Targaryen said, "and you came without bending the knee." Jon Snow's throat scars tightened. "I came to ask," Jon Snow said. "I came to warn you. If the dead win, there will be no throne left to take." Daenerys Targaryen's eyes flashed, and for the first time Jon Sn. I saw the fire behind the ice. "My brother was murdered," Daenerys Targaryen said. "My father was murdered. My family was butchered, hunted, scattered. I have crossed the world to reclaim what was stolen." Daenerys Targaryen leaned forward slightly, voice cutting. "And you stand in my hall and speak as if your war is the only war." Jon Snow held Daenerys Targaryen's gaze. "It is the only war that matters," Jon Snow said. A murmur rippled through Daenerys Targaryen's advisors. Grey Worm's grip tightened on his spear. Jorah Mormont shifted, anger flickering. Varys watched with a careful stillness, as if already weighing outcomes. Tyrion Lannister raised one hand slightly, a gesture of quieting. "Daenerys Targaryen," Tyrion Lannister said, voice smooth. "Jon Snow's message, regardless of the..." Tyrion Lannister glanced at Jon Snow's unbowed stance, then back. "Delivery is worth considering." Daenerys Targaryen did not look away from Jon Snow. "I will consider it," Daenerys Targaryen said, "after you do what every other lord in Westeros will do sooner or later." Jon Snow's jaw clenched. "And what is that?" Jon Snow asked, though Jon Snow already knew. Daenerys Targaryen's voice was soft, almost gentle, which made the demand more dangerous. "Bend the knee," Daenerys Targaryen said. "Swear fealty to me as your queen." The words fell into the hall like a stone into water, heavy and inevitable, sending ripples of reaction through everyone present. Davos Seaworth's shoulders tensed. Tyrion Lannister watched Jon Snow intently. Varys's eyes flicked between them like a needle stitching a tapestry. Grey Worm went still. Jon Snow felt the pull of the moment. This was the point where some men chose pride and some chose survival, where history turned on whether a head bowed. Jon Snow's mind flashed to Winterfell's walls, to Sansa Stark's fierce eyes, to Arya Stark's silent promise, to Bran Stark's calm prophecy. Jon Snow remembered Lyanna Mormont's words. Bend then break. Jon Snow remembered the dead's blue eyes in the dark. But Jon Snow also remembered the lords in Winterfell's hall, their voices rising at the phrase bend the knee, the way the North's loyalty was as brittle as ice. If Jon Snow bent here, the North would crack. If Jon Snow refused, Daenerys Targaryen might refuse the North the only weapon that could save it. Jon Snow took a breath. Jon Snow did not bow. I can't, Jon Snow said. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes narrowed, hardening like ice forming over fire. You won't, Daenerys Targaryen corrected. Jon Snow's voice was steady, even as the heat under Jon Snow's skin flared like a warning. I swore to protect the North, Jon Snow said. My people named me king in the North. I will not betray them. Daenerys Targaryen's expression turned cold. Then you came here to ask me to sacrifice my men, my resources, my time, Daenerys Targaryen said. For a man who won't even acknowledge me as queen. Jon Snow's fists clenched. I came here to ask you to live, Jon Snow said. All of you. For a moment, Daenerys Targaryen did not speak. The firelight flickered over Daenerys Targaryen's face, turning Daenerys Targaryen's eyes dark. Then Daenerys Targaryen stood. The movement was small, but it changed the room. Daenerys Targaryen stepped down from the platform, boots clicking on stone, and walked toward the painted table. Grey Worm shifted subtly, ready, but did not move. Daenerys Targaryen stopped across from Jon Snow, close enough that Jon Snow could see the fine lines of fatigue at the corners of Daenerys Targaryen's eyes, the controlled tension in Daenerys Targaryen's jaw. I am not here to be a savior for men who will not follow me, Daenerys Targaryen said quietly.
Jon Snow met Daenerys Targaryen's gaze.
Then you're here to be another queen who burns people until they kneel, Jon Snow said. And that will not save anyone. Jorah Mormont's hand flew to his sword. Grey Worm stepped forward a fraction. Davos Seaworth drew breath as if to speak, then stopped. Tyrion Lannister lifted both hands, voice quick and sharp. Jon Snow, Tyrion Lannister said. Perhaps. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes flashed, and Daenerys Targaryen's voice was low as a threat. You came to my home, Daenerys Targaryen said. You will not insult me in it. Jon Snow's scars burned. Then hear me, Jon Snow said, voice raw. The dead are coming. If you wait until they reach your gates, you will have waited too long. Daenerys Targaryen stared at Jon Snow for a long moment, and Jon Snow felt something in Daenerys Targaryen's gaze shift. Anger, yes, but also uncertainty. The world was full of men who lied to gain something. Jon Snow could see Daenerys Targaryen measuring whether this was another lie. Daenerys Targaryen turned sharply. Tyrion Lannister, Daenerys Targaryen said, show Jon Snow the mines. Tyrion Lannister blinked, surprised, then inclined his head. As you command, Tyrion Lannister said. Daenerys Targaryen looked back at Jon Snow, eyes cold. You may have my dragonglass, Daenerys Targaryen said. You may mine it if you can. Consider it payment for the warning you brought. Daenerys Targaryen's voice hardened. But do not mistake this for alliance. Jon Snow's breath loosened slightly, relief bitter in Jon Snow's mouth. Thank you, Jon Snow said, and meant it, even if it tasted like iron. Daenerys Targaryen's gaze flicked to Ghost again. And keep that beast leashed, Daenerys Targaryen said. Ghost's lips lifted in a silent snarl, as if Ghost understood. Jon Snow's voice was flat. Ghost is not a beast, Jon Snow said. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes held Jon Snow's one last heartbeat. Then Daenerys Targaryen turned and walked away, silver hair shifting like pale flame in torchlight. As Daenerys Targaryen's cloak swept past, the low rumble came again, closer this time, making the stone beneath Jon Snow's boots seem to vibrate. Jon Snow's blood answered with a flare of heat that Jon Snow had to bite down to hide. Tyrion Lannister waited until Daenerys Targaryen had left the hall before Tyrion Lannister approached Jon Snow. A careful smile on Tyrion Lannister's lips that did not quite reach Tyrion Lannister's eyes. "Jon Snow," Tyrion Lannister said, voice pleasantly dry. "You have a remarkable talent for making powerful people want to set you on fire." Davos Seaworth bristled. "He spoke the truth," Davos Seaworth said. Tyrion Lannister spread his hands. "I'm not disputing that," Tyrion Lannister said. "I'm merely pointing out that truth, delivered with the subtlety of a war hammer, tends to leave dents." Jon Snow's gaze stayed on the painted table, on the carved north with its stark coastline and jagged mountains, on the tiny line that represented the wall. "I didn't come for subtlety," Jon Snow said. "I came to keep my people alive." Tyrion Lannister's expression softened a fraction, something like respect flickering beneath the wit. "I believe you," Tyrion Lannister said. Behind Tyrion Lannister, Varys moved with silent grace, as if Varys were part of the hall itself. Varys's face remained calm, but Varys's eyes watched Jon Snow with a calculating patience that made Jon Snow's skin crawl. Tyrion Lannister lifted a hand toward the table. "Come," Tyrion Lannister said. "If you're going to ask for assistance, it helps to know what assistance looks like." Tyrion Lannister walked along the edge of the painted table, fingers trailing over carved mountains as if feeling the shape of the world. Jon Snow followed, ghost padding close, Davos Seaworth at Jon Snow's shoulder. "The north," Tyrion Lannister said, tapping the carved region with a small pointer. "Big, cold, stubborn. Your people." Jon Snow's jaw tightened at the ease with which Tyrion Lannister reduced an entire land to a word. "Yes," Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister's pointer slid up to the thin line of the wall. "And this," Tyrion Lannister said, voice shifting, less joking now, "is what you say will fall." Jon Snow's mouth went dry. "It will," Jon Snow said. "Eventually." Tyrion Lannister exhaled slowly. "I've read reports," Tyrion Lannister said. "Wildlings massing, strange sightings, men disappearing. It's easy to dismiss from a safe distance." Tyrion Lannister glanced at Jon Snow. "Harder when a man comes into your hall with death in his eyes and speaks as if he's already buried half his friends." Jon Snow looked away, not wanting to be read like a book. Davos Seaworth's voice was rough. "We're not asking Daenerys Targaryen to fight your wars," Davos Seaworth said. "We're asking Daenerys Targaryen to fight the war, the one that ends everything." Tyrion Lannister nodded slowly. "Yes," Tyrion Lannister said, "and Daenerys Targaryen is not accustomed to being told what matters." Jon Snow's voice was flat. "I noticed." Tyrion Lannister's pointer moved down along the coast to Dragonstone. "Here," Tyrion Lannister said, "obsidian, dragonglass, enough to outfit your armies if you can and eat it quickly." Tyrion Lannister tapped the table again. "You will have it. Daenerys Targaryen has ordered it." Jon Snow's breath eased, relief bitter. "Then we have what we came for," Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you?" Tyrion Lannister asked.
Jon Snow met Tyrion Lannister's gaze.
"We need more than weapons?" Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister's mouth twisted. "Weapons help," Tyrion Lannister said, "but wars are not won by weapons alone. Especially wars that require convincing people who have spent their whole lives convincing themselves that the world is safe." Tyrion Lannister's gaze flicked toward the door Daenerys Targaryen had exited through. "Daenerys Targaryen must be convinced." Jon Snow's throat scars tightened. "Daenerys Targaryen thinks I'm lying," Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister shrugged. "Daenerys Targaryen thinks everyone is lying until proven otherwise," Tyrion Lannister said. "It's what keeps Daenerys Targaryen alive." Varys spoke then, voice soft as silk. "Daenerys Targaryen also believes in destiny," Varys said. "And destiny has a way of making people inflexible." Jon Snow looked at Varys. "And what do you believe in?" Jon Snow asked. Varys's smile was small. I believe in the realm, Varys said. In the lives of people who do not sit in halls like this. Jon Snow held Varys's gaze, feeling the weight beneath the words. Varys was not offering help. Varys was measuring whether Jon Snow was a threat. Tyrion Lannister cleared his throat lightly, breaking the tension like a snapped thread. You'll be given quarters, Tyrion Lannister said, and access to the mines. Grey Worm will provide guards. Not because we don't trust you, Tyrion Lannister added, and the lie was polite enough to be almost kind, but because Dragonstone is dangerous. Jon Snow glanced at the black walls, the carved dragons. Because of the dragons, Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister's eyes flicked upward as a faint vibration rolled through the stone. Another distant rumble. Yes, Tyrion Lannister admitted. Because of the dragons. Ghost's head lifted, ears pricked. Jon Snow felt that answering heat in Jon Snow's chest stir. Tyrion Lannister watched Jon Snow carefully. You're not afraid, Tyrion Lannister observed. Jon Snow's voice was quiet. I don't know what I am, Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister's expression shifted, thoughtful. Most honest thing anyone has said in this hall today, Tyrion Lannister murmured. Varys's gaze lingered on Jon Snow's throat scars again, then slid away as if Varys had learned something worth storing. Tyrion Lannister gestured toward the doorway. Come, Tyrion Lannister said, before Daenerys Targaryen changes Daenerys Targaryen's mind. Jon Snow followed Tyrion Lannister out, ghost silent at Jon Snow's heel, Davos Seaworth close. The hall's torches crackled behind them, and the painted table's carved lands faded into shadow. As they walked through Dragonstone's corridors, the T-low rumble sounded again, nearer, rolling through stone like thunder trapped beneath earth. Jon Snow felt it in Jon Snow's bones, and the heat under Jon Snow's ribs flared in response, bright and hungry. Jon Snow clenched Jon Snow's jaw until it ached, forcing the reaction down, hiding it behind a face carved from northern ice. Jon Snow could not afford to let anyone see how the dragon's voices reached inside Jon Snow like hands. The caves beneath Dragonstone were not a mine so much as a wound in the earth that refused to close. The entrance yawned between jagged black rocks, the stones slick with moisture. Unsullied guards stood at the mouth, spears planted, watching with the same stillness they carried everywhere, as if the cave's darkness could not move them. Inside, the air was warmer, thick with the smell of sulfur and damp stone. Torchlight flickered, catching on obsidian walls and turning them into 1,000 dull mirrors. Jon Snow stepped into the dark and felt the hair at Jon Snow's arms rise. The heat under Jon Snow's ribs stirred, not just responding now, but pulling, a steady insistence that made Jon Snow's feet want to move deeper. Davos Seaworth walked close, torch held high, eyes narrowing at the glittering walls. This is something, Davos Seaworth murmured. Tyrion Lannister followed a few paces behind, lantern in hand, face lit from below like a storyteller in a tavern. Tyrion Lannister looked both fascinated and wary, as if Tyrion Lannister knew old places like this had a habit of swallowing arrogance whole. Obsidian, Tyrion Lannister said, voice echoing softly. Dragonglass, if you prefer the dramatic name. Tyrion Lannister's gaze swept the walls. Plenty of it. Jon Snow's gloved hand brushed a protruding vein of black glass. It was colder than the air, sharp-edged, and yet when Jon Snow touched it, Jon Snow felt warmth bloom under the skin of Jon Snow's palm, as if the glass recognized Jon Snow's blood. Ghost padded in behind Jon Snow, nose working. The direwolf's body was tense. Ghost did not like the cave. Ghost's claws clicked on stone. Ghost's ears flattened, and Ghost's eyes narrowed at the darkness ahead as if expecting something to lunge from it. They moved deeper, the passage narrowing, then widening into a chamber where the ceiling arched high above, lost in shadow. The walls here were less raw. They were carved. Ancient images covered the stone. Figures with spears and shields, tall men with long hair, their faces rough and grim. Other figures danced among them, smaller, slender, with leaf-like shapes and long limbs. The children of the forest, if the old stories were true. Jon Snow lifted the torch, light trembling over the carvings. The images seemed to move under flicker, men raising spears, children lifting hands as if calling something from earth. Davos Seaworth leaned in, squinting. "Who did this?" Davos Seaworth asked, voice low. Tyrion Lannister's eyes were wide with scholarly delight. "Long before Aegon Targaryen's conquest," Tyrion Lannister said. "Long before the Undulls. Perhaps even before the first men finished killing each other." Tyrion Lannister traced a carved line with one finger. "These are the old wars. The long night, the first fight against the dead." Jon Snow's throat tightened. Jon Snow stared at a carving of men with torches facing a shadow of jagged ice. Blue eyes were etched into the stone, staring out with lifeless malice. Jon Snow felt a chill creep along Jon Snow's spine that had nothing to do with the cave. "We're not the first," Jon Snow said quietly. "No," Tyrion Lannister agreed. "But we have the unique privilege of being the ones who may lose." Jon Snow's gaze moved across the wall until Jon Snow found another carving. Something different. A shape like wings, like scales, like fire. A dragon, etched into stone with crude certainty, its mouth open as if roaring. Jon Snow's hand lifted without thinking, fingers hovering over the carved dragon's head. The heat under Jon Snow's ribs surged, bright and sudden. For a heartbeat, Jon Snow's vision blurred at the edges, as if the carving's lines were trying to become real. Ghost growled low. Jon Snow jerked Jon Snow's hand back, breath-catching. Tyrion Lannister's eyes flicked to Jon Snow. "Something wrong?" Tyrion Lannister asked. Jon Snow forced Jon Snow's voice steady. "Nothing," Jon Snow said. "Just the air." Davos Seaworth eyed Jon Snow, suspicion and concern warring. Davos Seaworth did not speak, but Jon Snow saw Davos Seaworth's knuckles whiten around the torch. Tyrion Lannister turned back to the carvings, unaware or pretending to be. "These were made as a warning," Tyrion Lannister murmured. "Or as a reminder." Jon Snow's gaze lingered on the dragon carving, and the heat beneath Jon Snow's skin pulsed again, slower now, like a heartbeat answering another heartbeat. Further in, the mine opened into raw rock where men had already begun to work. A few local miners, Dragonstone men with weathered faces, stood with picks and baskets, waiting for orders. Unsullied, supervised, silent. Jon Snow stepped closer to the dragonglass veins protruding from the rock, dark crystals like frozen flames. Jon Snow thought of Arya Stark pressing that shard into Jon Snow's hand. Jon Snow thought of northern hands shaping these crystals into daggers, spear tips, arrows. Jon Snow saw the dead falling, blue eyes going dark. "We need as much as we can carry," Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister nodded. "Daenerys Targaryen wants the same," Tyrion Lannister said. "Dragonglass is useful even without monsters. It makes excellent daggers, and excellent threats." Jon Snow's jaw tightened. "It won't be a threat in the north," Jon Snow said. "It will be survival." Tyrion Lannister looked at Jon Snow for a long moment. "Perhaps," Tyrion Lannister said. "Or perhaps it will become whatever people decide it must be." Tyrion Lannister's mouth twisted. "People are very good at turning survival into politics." Jon Snow's gaze moved back to the carvings. The long night, the old wars, the dragon etched into stone beside the ice. Jon Snow felt suddenly, strongly, that Dragonstone had not only been built on dragonglass. Dragonstone had been built on memory. Jon Snow left the caves with the smell of obsidian and ancient warning clinging to Jon Snow's cloak. Outside, the wind struck cold again, and the sea roared against the cliffs below, but the heat under Jon Snow's ribs did not cool. It burned steady, as if the black stone island had placed a coal in Jon Snow's chest and refused to let Jon Snow put it out. The guest chamber Dragonstone offered Jon Snow was not a room meant for comfort. It was a room meant for containment. The walls were black stone, bare except for a few iron hooks and a faded tapestry that might once have been a dragon but now looked more like a shadow. A small brazier burned in a corner, throwing heat that did not reach the far edges. The narrow window was slit-like, rain streaking the glass, the sea beyond a shifting gray smear. The air smelled faintly of salt and smoke. Ghost lay by the door, body stretched across the threshold like a living lock. The direwolf's eyes were half-lidded, but his ears flicked at every sound in the corridor outside. Every footstep, every murmur. Ghost did not trust this place, and Ghost's distrust made Jon Snow feel less alone. Davos Seaworth sat on a stool near the brazier, mug in hand, staring into the coals as if trying to read the future there. Tyrion Lannister had followed them to the room with the easy audacity of a man who assumed walls existed for others. Now Tyrion Lannister leaned against the stone archway, looking around as if already planning improvements. Varys stood near the window, hands folded, face calm. Varys's presence felt like a shadow that breathed. Tyrion Lannister took a sip of wine from a cup someone had produced without Jon Snow noticing. "I hope you're appreciating Daenerys Targaryen's generosity," Tyrion Lannister said. "Daenerys Targaryen doesn't give away resources for free." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "Daenerys Targaryen didn't give it away," Jon Snow said. "Daenerys Targaryen thinks it's payment for a warning." Tyrion Lannister shrugged. "That still counts as generosity," Tyrion Lannister said. "Most rulers would have had you thrown into the sea for refusing to bend the knee." Davos Seaworth's eyes lifted. "Daenerys Targaryen might still," Davos Seaworth said grimly. Tyrion Lannister smiled thinly. "Daenerys Targaryen might," Tyrion Lannister agreed. "But Daenerys Targaryen won't today." Jon Snow watched Tyrion Lannister, suspicion coiled tight. "Why are you really here?" Jon Snow asked. "To convince me to kneel?" Tyrion Lannister's eyebrows rose. "I'm here because I like living," Tyrion Lannister said, "and I have a disturbing instinct that you're telling the truth." Tyrion Lannister's gaze sharpened. "Also, because you remind me of someone." Jon Snow's throat scars tightened. "Who?" Jon Snow asked. Tyrion Lannister's mouth twitched. "Someone who insisted on doing the right thing even when it got everyone killed," Tyrion Lannister said, and the bitterness beneath the wit was sharp enough to draw blood. Davos Seaworth shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Varys as if hoping Varys would vanish. Varys's voice was soft. "You came north with no army," Varys said to Jon Snow. "No banners, no promises, only a warning." Varys tilted his head. "That suggests either extraordinary honesty or extraordinary desperation."
Jon Snow met Varys gaze.
"Both, Jon Snow's." Varys's smile was faint. "Then you understand why Daenerys Targaryen is cautious," Varys said. "Daenerys Targaryen has survived because Daenerys Targaryen expects betrayal. Daenerys Targaryen has built an identity on being the last of something." Varys's eyes flicked to Jon Snow's face, lingering a fraction too long, then away. "And anything that challenges an identity can be dangerous." Jon Snow felt the heat under Jon Snow's ribs pulse, slow and heavy. Jon Snow kept Jon Snow's face still. "I'm not here to challenge Daenerys Targaryen," Jon Snow said. "I'm here because if the dead win, Daenerys Targaryen's identity won't matter. Daenerys Targaryen will be dead." Tyrion Lannister's laugh was quiet. "You have a gift," Tyrion Lannister said. "You make unpleasant truths sound like invitations." Jon Snow's gaze drifted to the window. Rain ran down the glass in thin, trembling lines. The sea beyond churned. Somewhere out there, dragons circled on air currents, their bodies cutting through cloud like knives. A low rumble rolled through the stone, deep and resonant. Another roar followed, closer, vibrating the brazier's coals, making the flame flicker. Davos Seaworth's mug paused halfway to his mouth. "That," Davos Seaworth muttered, "is not a comforting sound." Ghost's head lifted, eyes narrowing, ears pinning back. The direwolf's lip curled. Jon Snow's chest tightened. The roar struck Jon Snow like a hand on the heart, not crushing but claiming attention. The heat under Jon Snow's skin flared, bright and involuntary. Jon Snow's fingers curled, nails biting glove leather. Tyrion Lannister watched Jon Snow carefully. "You react strongly to the dragons," Tyrion Lannister said softly. Jon Snow forced a slow exhale. "Everyone reacts," Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister's eyes narrowed. "Not like that," Tyrion Lannister said. Jon Snow's jaw clenched. "I've seen enough monsters to know a dangerous sound," Jon Snow said. "That's all." Varys's gaze was steady. "Monsters," Varys repeated, as if the word was being weighed. "And yet you did not flinch when Daenerys Targaryen demanded your fealty. You did not flinch when Grey Worm's men took your sword. You did not flinch when the dragons roared above the courtyard." Varys's voice remained mild. "You are either very brave or very reckless." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "Or very tired," Jon Snow said. There was a pause and the air felt too thick. Davos Seaworth set his mug down with a soft thud. "What do you want, Varys?" Davos Seaworth asked, voice edged. Varys's smile was gentle and dangerous. "I want the realm to survive," Varys said simply. "And I want to know if Jon Snow is a man who helps that survival, or a man who becomes another problem." Jon Snow stared at Varys, the words sinking in. Everyone in this castle was watching everyone else. Every gesture a message, every silence a test. Jon Snow had come here to ask for a weapon. Instead, Jon Snow had stepped into a nest of eyes and knives. "I will take the Dragonglass," Jon Snow said, voice flat. "I will bring it north. I will fight the dead." Tyrion Lannister nodded slowly. "Good," Tyrion Lannister said. "And if Daenerys Targaryen eventually decides to fly north with dragons and armies, we will need someone up there who can convince the North not to treat Daenerys Targaryen like an invader." Jon Snow's throat scars tightened. "I can't promise the North will welcome Daenerys Targaryen," Jon Snow said. "I can only promise the dead will not." Another roar rolled through the stone, longer this time, and for a heartbeat Jon Snow felt, impossibly, an impression of attention turning toward the chamber, as if something huge had tilted its head and listened. Ghost stood abruptly, hackles rising. Jon Snow's heart hammered. Jon Snow forced Jon Snow's voice to remain even. "If you're done questioning me," Jon Snow said, "I need rest." Tyrion Lannister's mouth twisted. "Rest?" Tyrion Lannister murmured, as if the word were a joke. Then Tyrion Lannister straightened. "Very well," Tyrion Lannister said. "Tomorrow we begin mining. Try not to antagonize Daenerys Targaryen further in the meantime. Daenerys Targaryen's patience is not infinite." Jon Snow's voice was quiet. "Neither is mine," Jon Snow said. Varys inclined his head, acknowledging the warning. Tyrion Lannister moved toward the door. Varys followed, silent. Davos Seaworth lingered a moment longer. Davos Seaworth's eyes searched Jon Snow's face in the flickering brazier light. "You all right?" Davos Seaworth asked quietly. Jon Snow's mouth tightened. Jon Snow wanted to say yes. Jon Snow wanted to say Jon Snow was made of northern stone and would not break. But the truth sat heavy. Jon Snow looked at Ghost, then at the black walls. "No," Jon Snow admitted, "but I will be." Davos Seaworth's expression softened. "That's usually what you say when you're about to do something foolish," Davos Seaworth murmured. Jon Snow's gaze drifted to the window again, to the storm-dark sea. "Maybe foolish is all I have left," Jon Snow said. Davos Seaworth hesitated, then nodded once, grim. "Then I'll be foolish with you," Davos Seaworth said. Davos Seaworth left. The door shut. Ghost lay back down across the threshold. Jon Snow sat on the edge of the narrow bed, listening to the rain and the distant sea, listening for the next roar. When it came, Jon Snow felt it like a hand closing around Jon Snow's heart. Not squeezing, but holding, possessive and ancient. Jon Snow pressed a palm to Jon Snow's chest and realized Jon Snow was trembling. Not from cold, from something inside Jon Snow that was waking. Jon Snow did not sleep. When Jon Snow closed Jon Snow's eyes, the darkness filled with red light and the sensation of massive wings cutting air. Jon Snow could not tell if it was dream or memory or something else entirely. Something carried in blood rather than mind. After the third distant roar, Jon Snow rose from the bed with the quiet inevitability of a man surrendering to a pull he could not resist. Jon Snow wrapped Jon Snow's cloak around Jon Snow's shoulders, pushed open the chamber door, and stepped into Dragonstone's corridor. Ghost rose at once and followed, silent, a pale shadow moving through black stone. The castle was quieter at night, but not asleep. Torches burned in iron brackets. Unsullied stood like statues at intersections, their eyes following Jon Snow without expression. Somewhere deeper in the castle, someone laughed softly. Dothraki perhaps, or servants drinking away fear. The air held that faint sulfur warmth, like the earth itself exhaling. Jon Snow walked without knowing where Jon Snow was going until the corridor opened onto a terrace. The sea stretched below, black and restless, waves crashing against the cliffs with a constant fury. Wind swept across the terrace, cold and wet, tugging at Jon Snow's cloak. The moon was half hidden behind clouds, turning the water into moving silver scars. Daenerys Targaryen stood near the edge. Daenerys Targaryen's silhouette was sharp against the night, silver hair shifting in the wind like pale flame. Daenerys Targaryen did not flinch at the roar that rolled over the water. Daenerys Targaryen seemed to listen to it like a mother listening to a child cry somewhere out in the dark. Jon Snow stopped a few paces away, uncertain. Jon Snow had not been invited. Jon Snow's presence could be read as intrusion or challenge. Ghost stood beside Jon Snow, tail low, eyes fixed on Daenerys Targaryen. Daenerys Targaryen spoke without turning. "You walk quietly for a man who wants something," Daenerys Targaryen said. Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "I wasn't trying to wake anyone," Jon Snow said. Daenerys Targaryen turned slowly. Moonlight caught Daenerys Targaryen's face, softening the sharpness for a heartbeat. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes were dark. "I'm not sleeping," Daenerys Targaryen said. Jon Snow held Daenerys Targaryen's gaze. "Neither am I," Jon Snow said. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes flicked to Ghost. "Your wolf doesn't sleep either," Daenerys Targaryen observed. "Ghost watches," Jon Snow said. "So do I," Daenerys Targaryen said. Another roar rolled across the terrace, deeper now, close enough to make the torches tremble. Jon Snow felt the vibration in Jon Snow's ribs. The heat under Jon Snow's skin surged, bright and urgent. Daenerys Targaryen watched Jon Snow's face carefully. "The dragons don't like strangers," Daenerys Targaryen said. "They're restless. They've been restless since you arrived." Jon Snow's throat went dry. "Maybe they smell the north," Jon Snow said, trying or humor that did not come. Daenerys Targaryen's mouth did not curve. "They smell fear," Daenerys Targaryen said. "They smell weakness. They smell blood." Daenerys Targaryen's gaze sharpened. "They smell truth." Jon Snow swallowed, scars pulling. "I'm not lying," Jon Snow said. Daenerys Targaryen looked past Jon Snow, toward the dark line of the sea. "Everyone lies," Daenerys Targaryen said quietly. "They lie to survive. They lie to win. They lie to themselves." Daenerys Targaryen's voice turned hard. "My brother lied to me every day about what we were, what we deserved. Men lied to me about what they would do if I was obedient. Kings lied to me about peace." Daenerys Targaryen's eyes met Jon Snow's again. "So forgive me if I don't bend, because a man in black tells me there are monsters beyond the wall." Jon Snow felt something twist inside Jon Snow. Not anger this time, but understanding edged with bitterness. Jon Snow knew what it was to be lied to about who Jon Snow was. Jon Snow knew what it was to be shaped by other people's choices. "I'm not asking you to bend," Jon Snow said. "I'm asking you to believe." Daenerys Targaryen's breath came out in a thin cloud. "Belief is a luxury," Daenerys Targaryen said. "I have dragons, not faith." Jon Snow's gaze drifted upward as shadowed wings passed over the clouds, the movement barely visible, but felt like a pressure change in the air. Ghost's ears flattened again. Ghost gave a low, uneasy growl. You think your dragons make you safe, Jon Snow said, voice low. I've seen men think walls make them safe. I've seen them die with their hands on stone. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes narrowed. You're not afraid of my dragons, Daenerys Targaryen said. It was not a question. Jon Snow hesitated. The truth sat heavy. I don't know what I feel, Jon Snow admitted. Daenerys Targaryen's expression flickered, something like surprise passing through the ice. Then Daenerys Targaryen's face hardened again, controlled. You should feel fear, Daenerys Targaryen said. Fear keeps men honest. Jon Snow's voice was quiet. Fear didn't keep me alive, Jon Snow said. Duty did. Daenerys Targaryen's gaze held Jon Snow's, and for a heartbeat the tension between them shifted. Not softening, but changing shape, like ice cracking but not breaking. Duty, Daenerys Targaryen repeated, as if tasting the word. I've heard that word used to excuse terrible things. Jon Snow's jaw clenched. I'm not excusing anything, Jon Snow said. I'm telling you why I won't kneel. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes flashed. Because you think you're king, Daenerys Targaryen said. Jon Snow shook Jon Snow's head. Because I swore, Jon Snow said. And because if I kneel without my people's consent, I lose them. I need them alive. I need them united. The dead don't care if I'm king, but the living do. Daenerys Targaryen's lips pressed into a thin line. And what if I decide I don't care about the living who won't follow me?
Daenerys
Targaryen asked quietly. Jon Snow met Daenerys Targaryen's gaze without flinching. Then you'll be Queen of Ashes, Jon Snow said, and there will be nothing left to rule. A wave crashed far below, the sound like a giant slamming a door. Daenerys Targaryen's face went still. I am not my father, Daenerys Targaryen said, and the words were sharp with old pain. Jon Snow's throat tightened. Jon Snow had never met Aerys Targaryen, but Jon Snow had heard the stories. Wildfire, screams, madness. Jon Snow thought of Daenerys Targaryen's eyes, the control in them, the fear beneath it. Jon Snow thought of how close a person could stand to fire before it burned them. No, Jon Snow said quietly. You're not. Daenerys Targaryen stared at Jon Snow as if trying to decide whether the agreement was insult or acknowledgement. Ghost shifted, claws scraping stone softly, as if reminding Jon Snow that the terrace's edge was close, the drop unforgiving. Daenerys Targaryen's gaze flicked down to Ghost. Your wolf doesn't trust me, Daenerys Targaryen said. Ghost doesn't trust anyone, Jon Snow said. But it wasn't quite true. Ghost trusted Jon Snow. Ghost trusted the pack. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes lifted to the sky again. The dragons trust me, Daenerys Targaryen said softly. They're the only ones who do without question. Another roar rolled through the night. So close Jon Snow felt the stone beneath Jon Snow's boots vibrate. Jon Snow's blood answered with a flare of heat. Jon Snow clenched Jon Snow's fists, forcing stillness. Daenerys Targaryen's gaze snapped back to Jon Snow, sharp. What are you? Daenerys Targaryen asked, voice low. The question was not about titles. Jon Snow's breath caught. Jon Snow could have lied. Jon Snow could have said Jon Snow was nothing but a northern king. But the truth sat like a dragon egg in Jon Snow's chest, heavy and warm, threatening to crack. I'm tired, Jon Snow said, and the answer was true enough to be safe. Daenerys Targaryen watched Jon Snow for a long moment, then turned back to the sea. Go back to your room, Daenerys Targaryen said, voice controlled again. Mine the Dragonglass. Take it north. If your monsters are real, I will know soon enough. Jon Snow's mouth tightened. If you wait until you know, Jon Snow said. It might be too late. Daenerys Targaryen did not turn. Then pray you're wrong, Daenerys Targaryen said. Jon Snow stood for a heartbeat longer, watching Daenerys Targaryen's silver hair whip in the wind, watching Daenerys Targaryen stand alone against a black sea, a queen carved from loss and fire. Then Jon Snow turned away, ghost silent at Jon Snow's side. As Jon Snow walked back into Dragonstone's corridors, another roar rolled through the stone behind Jon Snow, and this time it sounded almost like laughter. Morning came gray and damp, the sky low enough to feel like it pressed on Dragonstone's towers. The rain had eased into mist that clung to everything: hair, cloak, stone, turning the world into a cold smear. In the lower courtyard, men gathered with picks and baskets, faces weathered by sea and work. They were Dragonstone miners, not soldiers. Their hands were thick, their shoulders bowed. Their eyes wary as unsullied soldiers formed a silent line along the courtyard's edge. Grey Worm stood at the front, spear upright, gaze sweeping the crowd with cold vigilance. Jon Snow stepped into the courtyard with Davos Seaworth, cloak damp, boots slick with wet stone. Ghost paced at Jon Snow's side, restless, sniffing the air as if searching for the source of the distant roars that kept threading through the castle like a heartbeat. Tyrion Lannister stood near a crate, scroll in hand, reading something and muttering under Tyrion Lannister's breath with the intensity of a man trying to tame chaos with ink. Grey Worm approached Jon Snow, expression unreadable. "The miners will be escorted," Grey Worm said. "They will work under guard." Jon Snow's gaze swept the unsullied line. "They're not prisoners," Jon Snow said. Grey Worm's eyes did not change. "Everyone is a prisoner to something," Grey Worm said. "These men will work. They will be safe. They will not steal. They will not die." The bluntness struck like a hammer. Jon Snow looked at the miners, at their wary faces. Jon Snow thought of northern farmers forced into war, of men pressed into fighting because winter did not care if they wanted peace. Jon Snow's voice was controlled. "We don't need guards to stop them from stealing," Jon Snow said. "We need them to work quickly." Grey Worm's gaze held Jon Snow's for a heartbeat. Then Grey Worm inclined his head in a small, precise motion that could have been respect or dismissal. "They will work quickly," Grey Worm said. "Daenerys Targaryen expects it." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "So do I," Jon Snow said. Grey Worm's eyes flicked to Ghost, a quick glance that did not quite hide discomfort. "Your animal will not enter the caves," Grey Worm said. Ghost growled low as if offended. Jon Snow's hand went to Ghost's fur, steadying. "Ghost stays with me," Jon Snow said. Grey Worm's voice remained flat. "Then Ghost stays outside," Grey Worm said. Jon Snow wanted to argue, to insist, but Jon Snow could feel the tension like a wire. Grey Worm did not negotiate. Grey Worm obeyed Daenerys Targaryen, and Grey Worm expected the world to do the same. Jon Snow forced a slow exhale. "Fine," Jon Snow said. "Ghost stays outside." Ghost's ears flattened, but Ghost remained at Jon Snow's heel, eyes bright with resentment. Tyrion Lannister looked up from the scroll, relief flickering. "Excellent," Tyrion Lannister said. "My apologies, Jon Snow, but I've been calculating how much dragonglass can be extracted per day without collapsing the caves and burying everyone alive. It's a surprisingly delicate balance between urgency and basic survival." Davos Seaworth muttered. "Surprisingly," Tyrion Lannister ignored the sarcasm. "If we begin immediately," Tyrion Lannister said, "we can have enough dragonglass for your northern forces within." Tyrion Lannister stopped, realizing the number would sound like an insult to a man racing death. Tyrion Lannister's expression tightened. "Soon," Jon Snow nodded once. Soon was all Jon Snow had. The miners began moving toward the cave entrance in small groups, picks on shoulders, baskets ready. Unsullied fell in around them, silent, spears catching dim light. Jon Snow followed, watching the men's faces. A few looked at Jon Snow with curiosity. One, an older man with gray in his beard, spat on the ground and muttered something that sounded like foreign kings before shuffling on. Davos Seaworth leaned closer to Jon Snow. "They don't like being watched," Davos Seaworth murmured. Jon Snow's voice was low. "Neither do I," Jon Snow said. At the cave mouth, the air warmed again. Steam curled from cracks in the rock. The miners hesitated at the threshold as if the dark breathed at them. Jon Snow understood. The cave smelled like old fire trapped in stone. Jon Snow stopped at the entrance. "Work quickly," Jon Snow said to the miners. "But don't get yourselves killed. I need the Dragonglass. I don't need corpses." The older miner glanced back, eyes narrowed. "We always try not to die," the older miner said, voice rough. Jon Snow nodded. "Then keep trying," Jon Snow said. The miners disappeared into darkness with their guards. Jon Snow remained outside. As promised, Ghost at Jon Snow's side. The direwolf paced, restless, circling the entrance as if guarding the men within. Every few moments Ghost would stop, head lifting, nostrils flaring, as if catching some scent on the wind that made Ghost's muscles tense. Tyrion Lannister stood beside Jon Snow, watching the mist roll across the courtyard. "You've thrown yourself into this," Tyrion Lannister said quietly. "No time to acclimate, no time to play the long game." Jon Snow's voice was flat. "The dead don't play long games," Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister's mouth twisted. "On the contrary," Tyrion Lannister murmured. "If the stories are true, they've been playing a very long one." Tyrion Lannister glanced at Jon Snow. "Which is why Daenerys Targaryen should listen." Jon Snow's jaw clenched. "Daenerys Targaryen will listen when Daenerys Targaryen chooses," Jon Snow said. "Not when I beg." Tyrion Lannister studied Jon Snow for a moment. "Pride," Tyrion Lannister observed softly. Jon Snow's eyes snapped to Tyrion Lannister. "Survival," Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister's gaze held steady. "Sometimes they look the same," Tyrion Lannister said. A roar rolled through the air, closer, clearer, echoing off cliffs and stone. The miners inside the cave could not hear it, but the courtyard did. Men froze. Unsullied did not move. Their eyes lifted. Dothraki voices murmured from somewhere beyond the walls. Ghost went rigid, hackles rising. The direwolf's teeth bared. Jon Snow's heart hammered. That heat under Jon Snow's ribs flared hot enough to make Jon Snow's skin prickle. Jon Snow clenched Jon Snow's fists, forcing stillness. Tyrion Lannister watched Jon Snow's reaction again, eyes narrowing. "They're restless," Tyrion Lannister murmured. Jon Snow's voice was hoarse. "So am I," Jon Snow said. And Jon Snow realized, with a chill that cut through the damp, that the dragon's roars no longer sounded like distant storms. They sounded like voices. As the miners worked and the first crates of dragonglass were hauled into the courtyard, Tyrion Lannister drew Jon Snow away from the operation with the careful urgency of a man who understood that time could be used like a weapon. They walked through Dragonstone's corridors, the black stone close and damp, torches smoking. Dragon carvings watched from walls, their eyes hollow, their mouths frozen in eternal roar. The air carried a low vibration that never quite left, a rumble too deep to be sound alone. Ghost padded beside Jon Snow, silent and tense, as if every corridor might hide an enemy. Unsullied passed at intervals, their gazes tracking, their posture unreadable. Tyrion Lannister spoke quietly as they walked. "Daenerys Targaryen did not refuse you completely," Tyrion Lannister said. "That matters." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "Daenerys Targaryen gave me dragonglass," Jon Snow said. "Daenerys Targaryen did not give me trust." Tyrion Lannister made a small sound that might have been agreement. "Trust is expensive," Tyrion Lannister said. "Daenerys Targaryen has spent years learning that people want Daenerys Targaryen's power, not Daenerys Targaryen's ideals." Jon Snow's gaze stayed forward. "I don't want Daenerys Targaryen's power," Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister glanced sideways. "Most people who say that are lying," Tyrion Lannister said. "And the ones who aren't." Tyrion Lannister's mouth twisted. "The ones who aren't are often the most dangerous, because they don't recognize when power has already begun to claim them." Jon Snow's throat scars tightened. Jon Snow said nothing. They reached a corridor window that opened onto a narrow view of the sea. The water below churned, gray-white foam smashing against black rock. Wind howled through the slit, bringing salt and cold. Varys appeared from a side passage, as if Varys had been waiting in the wall itself. Varys's footsteps were soft, Varys's face calm. "Jon Snow," Varys said, voice gentle. Tyrion Lannister. Tyrion Lannister's expression shifted into polite impatience. Varys, Tyrion Lannister said. Varys's gaze settled on Jon Snow. I admire what you did in the north, Varys said. Taking Winterfell back, uniting your people. It takes a particular kind of man to inspire loyalty in a land like that. Jon Snow's mouth tightened. It takes desperation, Jon Snow said. Varys's smile was faint. Desperation is a powerful tool, Varys said. So is fear. Jon Snow's eyes narrowed. What do you want? Jon Snow asked. Varys's hands spread slightly, palms open. I want what you want, Varys said. For people to live. Varys's gaze was steady. But I have learned that those who say they want to protect the realm sometimes end up harming it. Not out of malice, out of conviction. Jon Snow felt the words slide beneath skin like a thin blade. You think I'll harm the realm? Jon Snow said. Varys's voice remained calm. I think anyone can, Varys said. Given enough power, enough enough certainty. Varys's eyes lingered on Jon Snow's face in a way that made Jon Snow feel examined. And I think the realm cannot survive another war born of pride. Jon Snow's jaw clenched. This isn't pride, Jon Snow said. Varys inclined Varys's head. Perhaps, Varys said. Then perhaps you will forgive me for asking questions. Tyrion Lannister's voice cut in sharper. Varys, Tyrion Lannister said. If you're here to interrogate Jon Snow in a corridor, you're doing it in the most melodramatic possible way. Varys smiled slightly. Some habits are difficult to abandon, Varys said. Jon Snow's patience was thin. Ask, Jon Snow said. Varys's eyes held Jon Snow's. If Daenerys Targaryen refuses to go north, Varys asked softly, what will you do? Jon Snow's throat scars tightened. Jon Snow thought of Winterfell, of the Wall of the Dead's blue eyes. Jon Snow's answer came without hesitation. I'll fight without Daenerys Targaryen, Jon Snow said. And I'll die if I have to. Varys studied Jon Snow for a long moment. And if the north falls, Varys said, and the dead march south, and Daenerys Targaryen's armies are needed elsewhere, what will you do then? Jon Snow's fists clenched. I'll keep fighting, Jon Snow said, until there's nothing left. Tyrion Lannister's face tightened, as if the words cut both ways. Admirable and terrifying. Varys's gaze softened, a fraction. Then you truly believe this, Varys said. Jon Snow's voice was flat. I don't believe, Jon Snow said. I know. A low rumble rolled through the stone, deeper than before, and for a heartbeat the corridor felt as if it vibrated. Ghost's ears flattened, and Ghost let out a low growl. Varys's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, as if listening. The dragons have been restless, Varys observed. Jon Snow forced his face still. So I've been told, Jon Snow said. Varys's gaze slid back to Jon Snow, sharp now. Daenerys Targaryen believes the dragons are a symbol, Varys said softly. A sign, proof. If the dragons were to... Varys paused, choosing words carefully. Show interest in anything other than Daenerys Targaryen, it would unsettle more than you imagine. Jon Snow's mouth went dry. Jon Snow could feel heat under Jon Snow's ribs, alive, listening. The dragons are not mine, Jon Snow said. Varys's smile was gentle, but the warning beneath it was clear. Of course, Varys said. I only mean to say that symbols are fragile things. People kill to preserve them. Jon Snow stared at Varys, seeing the truth behind the soft voice. The South was not like the North. In the North, men killed for land, for revenge, for hunger. Here, men killed for stories. Tyrion Lannister exhaled slowly. We should go, Tyrion Lannister said, voice controlled. The Dragonglass won't mine itself, and Daenerys Targaryen is not known for patience. Varys inclined Varys's head. Of course, Varys said. I merely wanted to say, welcome, Jon Snow. I hope you survive Dragonstone. Varys's smile did not reach Varys's eyes. Many do not, Varys slipped away into shadow. Jon Snow watched Varys go, then looked at Tyrion Lannister. "Does Varys threaten everyone like that?" Jon Snow asked. Tyrion Lannister's mouth twisted. "Varys doesn't threaten," Tyrion Lannister said. "Varys warns, and warning is often worse, because warning implies you have choices." Jon Snow's voice was quiet. "I don't," Jon Snow said. Tyrion Lannister studied Jon Snow for a heartbeat longer, then nodded once, grim. "Then let's hope the world offers you a miracle," Tyrion Lannister murmured. They walked on, Ghost silent at Jon Snow's side, the black stone pressing close. Another rumble rolled through the castle, deeper now, and Jon Snow felt it answer inside Jon Snow like a door loosening on its hinges. Night returned like an old enemy, familiar and unavoidable. After the day's labor, after the crates of dragonglass began to fill with dark shards that glinted like frozen fire, Jon Snow found himself drawn back to the painted table as if the carved world could offer answers the real one refused. The map room was empty now. Daenerys Targaryen's stone seat sat in shadow beneath carved dragon jaws, waiting like a mouth. The torches had been lowered. Candles burned along the table's edge, their flames trembling in the draught, casting moving light across carved coastlines and mountain ridges. The land of Westeros lay before Jon Snow in wood and paint, reduced to something a hand could span. Jon Snow stood with both hands braced on the table, fingers spread over the carved north. Jon Snow's gloved fingertips rested near the line that represented the wall, thin and fragile in wood, too fragile for what it held back. Ghost stood beside Jon Snow, alert, ears pinned back. The direwolf stared toward the windows, where darkness pressed against glass. Beyond, the sea roared softly, and the wind whispered around stone. Jon Snow stared down at the map and felt the weight of distance. Winterfell seemed impossibly far. The wall farther still. The dead, closer every hour. A low rumble rolled through the room, deep enough to make the candle flames tremble. Another roar followed, longer, vibrating the table beneath Jon Snow's hands. Jon Snow felt the sound in Jon Snow's ribs, in Jon Snow's throat scars, in the place behind Jon Snow's sternum where that strange heat lived. Jon Snow swallowed, and the scars pulled like a reminder. Jon Snow had been cut open once for being what other men decided Jon Snow was. Now Jon Snow's blood hummed with something that made Jon Snow feel less like a man and more like a spark waiting for wind. Jon Snow closed Jon Snow's eyes for a moment, and in that darkness the map's carved lines became cliffs and sea and black stone. Jon Snow saw Dragonstone as the dream always showed it, jagged, ancient, burning under the skin. Jon Snow opened Jon Snow's eyes again and realized Ghost was staring not at the windows, but at Jon Snow. Ghost's red eyes held Jon Snow's with a blunt, animal question, as if Ghost could smell the change in Jon Snow's blood and did not know whether to accept it. "I'm still me," Jon Snow whispered, and the words sounded like a prayer. Ghost did not answer. Ghost only stood closer. Another roar rolled through the stone, nearer now, and this time Jon Snow felt something else with it. An impression like pressure behind the eyes, like the sensation of being watched from above. Jon Snow's head lifted slowly, gaze drifting toward the windows. Outside, the sky was dark, clouds heavy, but something moved across them, shadows that did not belong to birds. Massive wings cut through cloud, and the moonlight caught on scale for a heartbeat, a glint like steel on fire. Jon Snow's heart hammered. Jon Snow stepped away from the painted table without thinking, drawn toward the windows. The cold glass was slick under Jon Snow's palm. Jon Snow pressed close, peering out. Far above the cliffs a shape circled, huge, patient. Another shape followed, and another. The dragons were not dots at that distance. They were storms given flesh, moving with a certainty that made the air feel small. The nearest dragon let out a roar that rolled across the sea and slammed into Dragonstone's walls. Jon Snow felt the sound like a hand on the spine. The heat inside Jon Snow flared so sharply Jon Snow had to grip the window ledge to keep from swaying. Ghost growled, low and uneasy. Jon Snow's breath came fast. Jon Snow forced it slower, trying to calm the fire under Jon Snow's ribs like a man calming a horse. But it did not calm. It rose, answering the roar with a pulse of its own. For a heartbeat, Jon Snow felt a presence. Not in the room, not behind Jon Snow, but in the air beyond the window. An ancient attention turned, heavy and curious. Jon Snow's mouth went dry. Jon Snow whispered, "No." Though Jon Snow did not know what Jon Snow was refusing, the dragon's shadow drifted, and suddenly Jon Snow knew with terrifying clarity that the dragon was looking at the window, looking at Dragonstone, looking at Jon Snow. Not with eyes Jon Snow could see, but with something else, a sense that traveled through blood and heat. Jon Snow stumbled back from the window, chest tight, hand pressed to Jon Snow's ribs as if to hold the heat in. Ghost stepped in front of Jon Snow at once, body bristling, protective. The direwolf's growl deepened, a warning to whatever Jon Snow could not see. Jon Snow stared at Ghost, at the way Ghost placed himself between Jon Snow and the dark. Jon Snow thought of the wall, of the way men placed stone between themselves and winter. Jon Snow thought of the old wars carved in the caves. Men with torches facing shadows, children raising hands. Jon Snow realized Jon Snow's hands were shaking. Jon Snow forced Jon Snow's fingers to still. Jon Snow turned back to the painted table, to the carved world. Jon Snow pressed both palms against the north again, grounding, anchoring. "I am not here for thrones," Jon Snow whispered into the candlelit silence. "I am not here for destiny. I am here because the dead are coming." The words sounded small in the face of dragon roars. The candles flickered as another roar rolled through the stone. And this time Jon Snow felt the answer inside Jon Snow rise like a flame reaching toward oil. Jon Snow turned away from the table and walked out of the room with Ghost at Jon Snow's side. Jon Snow did not know where Jon Snow was going. Jon Snow only knew Jon Snow could not stay still while something with wings called Jon Snow's blood like a horn. The path Jon Snow took down Dragonstone's corridors felt less like a choice and more like being guided by something that lived under skin. Jon Snow moved through black stone passages that narrowed and widened like throats, past sleeping guards, past torch brackets that hissed with damp. Ghost followed without hesitation, silent as a shadow. The air grew warmer with every step, the sulfur scent thickening until it clung to the back of Jon Snow's tongue. Jon Snow heard it before Jon Snow saw it. The steady, heavy breath of something enormous, the scrape of claws on stone, the low rumble that was not sound but a presence. Jon Snow reached a set of gates bound in iron. The iron was warm under Jon Snow's glove. Jon Snow hesitated only a heartbeat, then pushed the gate open. The dragon courtyard was a high-walled enclosure open to the sky, black stone rising on all sides like the inside of a bowl. Torches burned along the walls, their flames bending in the wind that swept down from above. The sky overhead was clouded, the moon a pale smear. Mist drifted in, curling around stone and torch smoke. The ground was not dirt. It was black rock, cracked and uneven, warm in places as if the earth beneath still remembered fire. Jon Snow stepped into the courtyard and felt the heat under Jon Snow's ribs surge so sharply it stole breath. A shape moved in the shadows. It was enormous, coiling out of darkness with a slow certainty that made the world feel suddenly too small. Green bronze scales caught torchlight in jagged glints. A long neck arched, wings folded along a body like living armor. Steam curled from nostrils the size of a man's head. Regal. Jon Snow had never seen a dragon before, and yet Jon Snow's mind did not break at the sight. It should have been impossible. It should have been terror. Instead, Jon Snow felt, impossibly, as if Jon Snow were looking at something Jon Snow had always known existed, something that had haunted Jon Snow's blood long before Jon Snow had words for it. Ghost froze beside Jon Snow, hackles rising. The direwolf's teeth bared, but Ghost did not charge. Ghost's body trembled, torn between instinct to fight and instinct to flee. Regal's head lowered slightly, eyes focusing. The dragon's eyes were not blue like White Walker eyes. They were deep and dark and bright with fire, old intelligence swirling behind them. They fixed on Jon Snow with a sharpness that made Jon Snow feel stripped to bone. Jon Snow forced Jon Snow's feet to stay planted. Jon Snow's heart hammered so hard Jon Snow could feel it in Jon Snow's scars. Another dragon shifted farther back in the shadow, pale gold scales catching faint torchlight. Viserion, watching, head tilted, as if curious. Rhaegal stepped forward. The dragon's claws clicked on stone. Each footfall was slow, deliberate, measured. Steam rolled from Rhaegal's nostrils in thick breaths that smelled of smoke and salt and something like hot metal. Jon Snow stood still, hands open at Jay. On Snow's sides, resisting every instinct to reach for a sword that was not there. Rhaegal's head lowered until Rhaegal's massive snout was level with Jon Snow's face. Heat washed over Jon Snow, not from flame but from life raw, living heat that made Jon Snow's skin prickle. Jon Snow could see the texture of Rhaegal's scales up close, the tiny scars, the thin lines where old wounds had healed. Jon Snow could hear the wet click of Rhaegal's breath, the low rumble in Rhaegal's chest like a purr that could shatter bone. Rhaegal inhaled. The dragon's nostrils flared, steam curling around Jon Snow's face. Jon Snow's breath caught. Jon Snow expected a hiss, a snap, a sudden blaze of fire. Rhaegal did none of those things. Rhaegal simply smelled Jon Snow, as calmly as Ghost had smelled Samwell Tarly when Samwell Tarly arrived at Winterfell. Rhaegal's eyes narrowed slightly, focusing, and Jon Snow felt something in Jon Snow's chest answer. A flare of heat meeting heat. For a heartbeat, Jon Snow's mind filled with sensation that was not Jon Snow's. Sky, wind, the taste of salt, the feeling of vast wings unfolding. It hit Jon Snow like a wave, dizzying. Jon Snow swayed, barely. Ghost let out a low, frantic whine. A sharp voice cut across the courtyard. Jon Snow! Jon Snow did not turn. Jon Snow could not. The dragon's eyes held Jon Snow's like a chain. Footsteps echoed on stone. Torches flared as figures entered at the courtyard's edge. Daenerys Targaryen stood there, cloak whipping in the wind, silver hair pale in torchlight. Jorah Mormont was at Daenerys Targaryen's side, hand on sword, face taut with alarm. Grey Worm stood behind them with unsullied soldiers, spears upright, eyes fixed on the dragons. Daenerys Targaryen's face was hard with fury and fear. "What are you doing?" Daenerys Targaryen demanded. Jon Snow's mouth was dry. Jon Snow did not look away from Rhaegal. "I heard them," Jon Snow said hoarsely. Jon Snow swallowed, throat scars pulling. "I don't know." Daenerys Targaryen took a step forward, voice sharp. "Back away," Daenerys Targaryen commanded. Rhaegal did not react to Daenerys Targaryen's command. Rhaegal's eyes remained fixed on Jon Snow. The dragon's head lowered a fraction more, close enough that Jon Snow could feel Rhaegal's breath on Jon Snow's lips, close enough that one snap would end Jon Snow. Rhaegal inhaled again, slow and deep, and still Rhaegal did not hiss. In the torchlight, Daenerys Targaryen's expression shifted, shock cutting through anger, disbelief widening Daenerys Targaryen's eyes. Jon Snow's blood burned. The heat under Jon Snow's ribs surged like a fire finding air. And for a heartbeat Jon Snow felt a certainty that terrified Jon Snow more than any dragon's teeth. Rhaegal knew Jon Snow. Rhaegal had known Jon Snow the moment Jon Snow stepped onto Dragonstone's black stone. Rhaegal's gaze held Jon Snow's, ancient and fierce and questioning. And Jon Snow realized the roar that had been. Calling was not a threat. It was recognition answering blood with blood. And in the silence that followed Rhaegal's breath, the entire courtyard seemed to hold its own breath, waiting to see whether fire would claim ice, or whether ice would bend toward fire without breaking.